In a deserted land torn by a storm over the battlefield looms a terrible, many-eyed spider-like beast. Below, a huge horned bear roars, its breath turning to steam in the cold air, and beneath its paw lies a crushed, smaller creature. The great spider demon freezes its attention, is caught by a small, curious purple swirl of energy hovering before its fangmaw. Finally, the source of the noise is revealed to be a crying human infant, tightly wrapped in blankets. Nearby, a man with a scar on his eye and a white beard stands in a hooded cloak, staring in shock and not understanding why a human child ended up in such a forsaken place. After 12 years, the harsh reality of this world, the demon realm, has not changed. Monsters roam freely here, and conflict is a daily struggle for survival, underscored by the roar of yet another giant horned bear. In this cruel world, the human child has grown up and now takes part in these very battles for survival. The boy, 12-year-old Adele, stands over the corpse of a slain beast and smiles, glad to have secured dinner, hoping it will please his grandfather. Then he turns and walks alone into the deserted wasteland. He approaches a simple brick house and loudly announces his return. Inside, the old man Gramps lies weak in bed, gathering strength to greet Ed Elbeck. With youthful enthusiasm, Ed El proudly lifted the head of a berry cat and suggested cooking a nourishing stew from it. Later, the mood turns serious. The grandfather begins a heavy, weighty conversation, reminding Edel that he raised him strictly for these 12 years, and insists in the demonic world where they live only the strong survive, to which Edel quietly replies that he understands. Feeling the weight of the moment, Edel asks why this conversation suddenly began. The grandfather looks at the boy he raised and says that he has finally become strong enough to survive in this world on his own. He smiled warmly at his guardian. His heart full of gratitude, memories stood before his eyes of how his grandfather saved him from monsters when he was still an infant. He continued and confessed that Grants tempered him through countless trials, even in those moments when he was sure he would die. Despite everything he shown, said that every day was a true joy and sincerely thanked. The grandfather listened silently, the joyful face of the boy reflected in his eye, and the grandfather quietly whispered that he understood. The old man's face became serious when he named Edel, and the boy cast a questioning look in response. The cheerful memory dissipated, replaced by a depressing reality. The grandfather lay weak in bed. He sharply ordered Edel to be silent. His voice became gloomy, and then confessed that he had little time left to live and there were things he must say. Edelf rose, froze in silence at the news, and the grandfather, seeing his shock, quietly assured him that everything was fine. He gently placed his hand on the boy's head while tears rolled down El's face and earnestly urged him to listen carefully. The truth is, sooner or later everyone dies. Then he gave the final instruction. When he is gone, Edel must go to the human world. This order stunned Edel, and he only repeated the words, not believing. From that spot on the floor, a small creature resembling a panda doubted the words, and the grandfather confirmed it is true. Unlike demons, humans in Ed Eldu look very much like him on the outside. He explained that the only way to the human world is to overcome the dungeon called the Abyss, and admitted that the path is incredibly difficult, but confidently said that today's Edel would manage perfectly. A fragile hand trembled as it extended the compass and letter. He ordered Edel to take them and explained that the compass would lead him to the dungeon. Edel, clutching the items, asked what it was. He explained that the letter was from Maribel, Ramirez's leading student, and the grandfather assured El that they are known in the human world, so finding them would be easy. An attempt to speak threw the old man into a severe coughing fit, and frightened El shouted his name, trying to assure that Maribel would definitely take care of him as soon as he arrived. The grandfather gently took the boy's hand and, giving him the same feeling, with a quiet smile thanked Edel for these 12 years and promised to watch over his future exploits from the heavens. And Edel, broken with grief, clutched his heart as his guardian died. Later, Edel stood alone before a simple tombstone under the open sky and whispered the name of his guardian into the wind. Sorrow receded and gave way to determination, clutching the compass. He declared that he was leaving, and for the last time thanked his grandfather with all his heart for raising him. Following the compass, he reached the entrance to the abyss. Noticing the stairs leading down into the darkness, he gathered his courage, reaffirming his goal once more to conquer the dungeon and find Maribel in the human world. Deep in the same dungeons, a group of 4 adventurers stood before similar stairs. The blonde swordsman said with relief that they had finally reached their goal, the 30th floor. Their celebration was met pragmatically. In heavy armor, the knight coldly remarked, considering that food and supplies were running low, this was their limit. The mage added that they had been exploring for a whole month, and the swordsman sighed even the upper floors were difficult for them. The swordsman asked aloud how many floors the dungeon might hide, and the sorceress recalled a legend that 4 heroes had reached the 50th floor, though she honestly admitted she did not know for sure. And the very thought of another 20 floors stunned her companion. He simply could not believe it. Deep in the abyss, the sorceress of the adventuring party gazed into the chasm and wondered what was at the very bottom, recalling that even the legendary 4 heroes had not reached there, and whispered a rumor that the dungeon was directly connected to the demon realm, a thought that clearly shook her. Philosophical reflections were instantly cut short by an urgent threat, a huge fiery bird monster. The light-haired adventurer shouted loudly about its incredible speed, while Marable coughed from the scorching heat. Pressed down by the creature, the squad's knight shouted that he could not hold on, shocked by a monster he had never seen. In response to the desperate call of the knight, Marable completed the spell, and a glowing sphere of concentrated energy appeared in her hand. She unleashed the attack, and it detonated right on the creature with a blinding, brutal explosion. The force exploded, engulfed the fire monster and threw it back, and the knight staggered from the shockwave. From a nearby passage, a lone figure Edel watched the battle and wondered what a woman was doing here. His presence was immediately noticed. The blonde adventurer shouted for him to stop, but Edel simply raised his hand in a casual greeting, and when the embarrassed adventurer asked if he was alone, he answered briefly and affirmatively. He nodded, then cheerfully confirmed the place, saying, "This is definitely the 30th floor," while the blonde adventuress looked at him, sweating, not believing that someone could reach such depths on their own. They themselves could not believe it. His disbelief echoed throughout the gathered group. The knight gloomily accepted it as a fact, and Edel looked past everyone, his gaze fixed on the path ahead, and he already counted 30 more floors. To leave, the blonde adventurer considered the consequences of Edel's words, and suddenly he was struck by shock. The boy had not descended through the entrance. He rose from below. When the experienced travelers froze in amazement, Edel confidently stepped forward, continuing his path deeper into. He continued his ascent, effortlessly dodging creatures on the way, noticing with interest that the higher he climbed, the weaker the monsters became. Truly a strange dungeon. He sighed with relief and realized that he had finally reached the surface, which could mean only one thing: this was a human world of humans. Emerging from the darkness of the dungeon's maw, he stood on the threshold of a new world. His eyes widened at what he saw. The world was so green and beautiful, sharply contrasting with the gloom of the demonic realm. In the distance on the horizon stood a majestic castle, and having found himself in the human world, he immediately understood his first task: to find a person named Mirabelle, mentioned in the letter he was transferred. Meanwhile, in the Kingdom of Rhodes stood the prestigious Academy of Heroes, a magnificent school forging a new generation of protectors. In the director's office stood the head of the academy and his assistant, gazing into the courtyard. The assistant happily noted that this year they had again managed to gather another group of good students. The director looked with an understanding expression. His gaze was directed toward the future, and he firmly said that from this new cohort a hero would be born. The journey continues through endless expanses, with majestic snow-dusted mountains dominating the horizon under a cloudless sky. Through the forest dotted with sunlit patches, a small creature resembling a panda rushes forward, stirring leaves on the path. It stops, and Edel, who is walking behind, looks around and thinks involuntarily. In the human world, mountains do not move. Then he recalls his goal and, thinking restlessly, wonders who this Marable is and where he could find him now. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a passerby who points ahead and tells the surprised Edel that the Academy of Heroes in the Kingdom on the Road is very close. Filled with energy from the news, he rushes on, marveling at human kindness. The man gave him directions just like that, while demons, it seems to him, would demand an organ or two for such information. Soon a magnificent building of the Academy of Heroes emerges before his eyes, a grand castle with numerous towers and spires, radiating a sense of importance and prestige. In the bustling academy, the director, a man named Marable, is approached by his assistant Shaltier. She greets him with a smile and says she has compiled a list of this year's newcomers for the Academy of Heroes. His assistant enthusiastically praises him, saying that the record number of applicants this year is undoubtedly the result of his hard work. The director modestly deflects the compliment, insisting that it happened because everyone worked so diligently. Then the elf woman with glasses bitterly reminds him of the difficult beginnings, how kings and nobility feared his growing influence and constantly criticized him. She continues reporting to Director Marable. Problems are only increasing. The conflict between commoners and nobility does not subside, and now royal families and aristocrats are enrolling their children here, complicating the already tense relations in the academy. He listens, his face gloomy. The director does not see this problem being resolved soon. He quietly wishes his magical mentor, Master Ramirez, were nearby, because he believes that with his advice everything could be different. His thoughts are broken by a cheerful greeting. Edel appeared in the doorway. The elf woman froze, wondering how he passed the academy's defenses. The golems are programmed to destroy anyone who invades the building. The boy looks around, puzzled by the question about the golems, and casually waves his hand toward a pile of stones, saying that he just beat them. They look with distrust, and the director exclaims that those defenses should not have been so easily overcome. The shock recedes and is replaced by anxiety, seeing the enormous power of the invader. The elf's protective instincts flare up, and she decides to protect Director Marable at all costs, preparing to unleash all her magical power at once. With a sharp scream, she rushed forward, raised her palm, and released a concentrated explosion of raw power. A burst of energy rushes straight at Edel. He just stands and watches its approach, his face hidden in the shadow of his hood. The hood collided with him, but instead of an explosion, the energy seemed to wrap him in a protective dome. The dome dissipates, the energy fades, and Edel remains completely unharmed. The director and the elf freeze speechless. And Edel himself, confused by the attack, explains that he only came to deliver a letter to someone named Marable. He stood calmly while the elf warned Director Marable about the danger he posed, but he reassured her, saying he felt no hostility from the boy, and turning to Edel, asked to see the letter. Edel confirmed it was for him. The director took the offered letter, and seriousness immediately appeared on his face as he began to read. His hand trembled as a shocking realization overwhelmed him. He had heard nothing from Master Ramirez for over 20 years and believed he had gone to the demon realm. His eyes widened in disbelief upon seeing the contents of the letter. Losing his composure, he raised his eyes to Edel, sweat pouring down his forehead. Confirming that if it was true Master Ramirez had indeed escaped the abyss, he urgently asked the boy where he had met his teacher. Outside, the academy stood silently under a gloomy sky, unaware of the fateful conversation taking place within its walls. In the office, another man with noticeable mustaches leaned forward and questioned Edel about the master's last moments, while Director Marable listened, stunned by the revelation that Edel was raised in the demon world. Kingdom, Ed Elcomley explained that his master told him he would watch his exploits from the sky. Marable read these words in the letter, his face darkened as he pondered this news. His hands clenched tightly on the table. Now he understood. Master Ramirez entrusted this boy to him. Getting ready, Marable looked up. Edel, having completed his task, asked what he should do now because the only instruction was to deliver. The director stood up, resolutely deciding to fulfill his lord's will and addressed the youth before him with a proposal. How would you like to visit this? At school he makes a decision, but the elf girl who heard it asks in shock and indignation why he is ready to accept a person of unknown origin without an entrance exam. And the director calmly replies that he does not mind exempting from the exam because he personally guarantees Edel's status and abilities. He continues and explains to Edel, someone raised by Master Ramirez is the perfect candidate for this school. He aims to raise future heroes just like his teacher, and on this he announces the matter of the saw. The issue is resolved. The director returns to his subordinate and asks Skoltier to take care of others for a while, so she can show him the campus and teach him a few things. She understands the orders. Returning to Edel, she sharply tells him to follow her, adding a sharp challenge. He must not fall behind after all. In the human world he clearly lacks common sense. The principal simply notes that he will leave it in her hands. As she leads him through the sprawling grounds of the academy, Edel calls out, asking where they are. They walk. She looks back not to answer but to throw another question, whether he can keep up with her current pace at all, and Edel is noticeably puzzled by her obvious haste. The heel of her shoe sharply clicked on the path as she stopped. She says that despite Director Marable's words, she simply cannot allow a person with mediocre abilities to be enrolled. His eyes widen slightly as he pieces the puzzle together in his head and asks if this walk is an exam. Skoltier confirms that in a certain sense it is an entrance exam, points directly at him and says she will personally test his strength, then disdainfully adds that it is only to warm up a little. Saying this, she leads him to the edge of a dense, gloomy forest, from where suddenly a flock of birds takes flight. Escape, she firmly points towards the forest and lays out the conditions of her trial. He must go straight through the thicket to the other side. Glancing at the clock, she says it is exactly 3 o'clock and gives him a time limit 1 hour. She is silent for a moment, her face reveals no thoughts. Edel, without stopping, clarifies the task aloud, asking if he just needs to pass through the forest, and she finally speaks in a dry tone, warning him not to under. She gives an approximate estimate and explains the dangers in detail. It is easy to get lost in the forest, fierce monsters live there, and the distance is significant. Even by cart across the plain it takes 3 hours. Underfoot is flat ground. She turned to him and added that without enough strength it would be difficult to break through in just an hour, but admitted, if he really has the strength to pass the academy's entrance exam, then naturally he should be able to achieve this. Smiling slightly condescendingly, she hints that it might be easier for him to follow her if he can manage not to fall behind at all. Announcing that she will go ahead, she takes a step forward, her heels sharply striking the ground, preparing to move. In an instant she disappears from the spot, leaving behind a trail of displaced air and dust clouds, and Edel can only watch from afar as the power consumes her. She rushes at dazzling speed, a confident smile playing on her lips as she makes her way through the thicket. In the forest, her rapid advance is immediately noticed by the inhabitants. A pack of small, fierce monsters bursts out from the underbrush to block her path. The path by ambush hardly slows her down. With a smooth motion, she raises her hand, gathering a swirling vortex of energy around her, ready to deal with the creatures without stopping. Confident step, she mocked the creatures as if to say, do they really think something of their level can stop her? The cat-like monster recoiled in horror from the sheer force of her Presence, continuing her dash, she glances back toward where she came from. A fleeting thought crosses her mind. Maybe she slightly overestimated the difficulty of this trial. Too high, she rushes through the forest at full speed and thinks that at most only half of the freshmen this year could pass this test. A powerful leap carries her further into the forest. Suddenly stopping, she puts her hand to her face and now wonders how long it will take the young man to get out of the F. In the thick of the forest, her thoughts drift to Edel. She imagines him lonely somewhere behind her. He was so full of confidence, would he just give up halfway? Challenge, a sudden sound startles her. Her eyes open wide, she turns and realizes someone is already. She has already arrived. Edel stands before her, panting, waving his hand and greeting her, looking as if he just ran a sprint. Renuis appeared running, his appearance shocked her. She looks in disbelief. One incredible thought echoes in her head. Could he have broken through the forest and so quickly FFFFF? Rather than what she expected, she demands to know how long he has been waiting here. Edel casually waves his hand and says she is late and that he was sure she would come. At first, then he indifferently says he waited about 20 minutes. Maybe. She feels dizzy and immediately dismisses his words as a lie, but calm Edel assures her that it is not so and that he thought it would be a harder fight. He asks her to look. And when she looks, her eye widens in. It was a complete shock. Everything opens up above through the dense forest. An incredibly wide, absolutely straight path is cut, strewn with ethereal silhouettes of countless fallen monsters, and two of them stand. Standing at its end, he raises two fingers and indifferently explains to the one shouting about a trick that he simply drew this path because he was bored and refused to accept this reality. She pointed at him with a trembling finger and said she still couldn't believe it, demanding another duel, a direct duel against her. He doubts her proposal and this forces her to lay out the terms. Simultaneous start, they will race through the F. Make them be together. To raise the stakes, she makes a shocking bet. If she loses, she will imitate a dog and bark for him, and Edel, confused, insists that this is absolutely unnecessary, but it seems she is really capable of it. Determined, they take their places at the starting line. She leans forward, her face full of intense concentration, and she begins the countdown. Ready, the last shout, on your marks, go. And she bursts forward, raising a cloud of dust, accelerating. With all her might she rushed, and in a flash he disappeared. She reaches out into the void, a wave of shock covers her because she realizes there is no chance to catch him. The truth is undeniable, the race ended before it even really began. Far ahead, Edel has already crossed the finish line and, gasping for breath, falls to the ground. And defeated, he is already indifferently drawing a sandcastle, humming a melody when she finally catches up. Bitterly smiling, she admits defeat and says that this time she is the one eating dust. She accepts that the promise must be kept. She falls to her knees before him, preparing to fulfill the bet and pretend to be a dog. Edel, horrified, insists that she must not do this. She stands firm, saying that if she breaks the promise, she will become unfit for being a teacher. Her face flushed with shame, she let out one quiet, barely audible sound. Wolf humiliation floods her. She is still barking, her hands pressed to the ground and defeat. As she does this, a terrible thought flashes through her mind. What if other staff or students start beating her with a whip? This look, the very thought that you might be seen in such a state, chills to the bone. The bed passed through her, but then a strange realization dawned on her. To her own surprise, she found that she was somewhat aroused through degradation. Edel, observing this strange turn of events, was completely confused. He did not know what to do in such a situation. His gaze rising upward, he fixed his gaze on a bird circling above them. He noticed that it had been following them for some time and wondered if it was a familiar of that marable person. His eyes did not leave the bird flying toward the large mirrored sphere in the sky, and suddenly he was struck by a shocking realization. It was not just a bird. Meanwhile, far away, Director Marable was gazing into a crystal ball for divination and saw the image of Edel in it. He was sweating, impressed, and remarked to himself how the boy is good. The assistant calls him Master Ramirez, and the director later explains that, knowing the character of the elf Shaltier, he anticipated this and took care of the familiar. This was familiar to Taylor. He looked at the embarrassed image of his assistant in the crystal sphere, and with a slight but tired smile, decided to pretend he had not seen this spectacle. Meanwhile, Edel stood thoughtfully, propping his chin, and thought about his guardian, reasoning that the old man had indeed left behind an unusually special boy. In the office, Director Shaltier's assistant finished explaining to Edel and asked if he understood everything about the school. He only cast a silent, inquisitive glance. Before he could answer, another woman appeared in the doorway, Marable, who sharply asked Shaltier why she had not yet shown the boy around the school, and the assistant turned, embarrassed, and quickly apologized to Marable herself. Marable's stern expression melted, replaced by deep anxiety. She shuddered, thinking that a child raised in the demon world was truly a frightening prospect. Meanwhile, the academy director was completing the final formalities, informing Edel that he was admitted, and from today he would live in the student dormitory. The mention of the dormitory clearly surprised Edel, so the interested director asked what kind of hell he had endured in the demon world, where even 4 heroes could not set foot. Later, the director began showing Edel the campus grounds. As they walked, he explained that the academy has separate dormitories for each level of study. He leads EDL down a long, impeccably clean corridor, noting that all freshmen, both boys and girls, are given separate rooms. They stop in front of one of the doors. "This is your room," the director announced loudly, and added that it doesn't matter where the student is from or what their status is, everyone is given a room of the same size. Edel peeks inside with an inscrutable expression. The room is modest, only one bed and a small nightstand, and he quietly wonders if that's all. Sensing the boy's thoughts, the director explained that the rooms are only for sleeping, but assured him that the school's other facilities and activities are very diverse. After the introduction, he smiled and added, "Alice is here, you know, that's me." And Alice remembered that there was another student he really wanted EDL to meet. He leads Edel to the neighboring room, where a young woman is sitting at a table reading. Startled, she looks up and reprimands them for entering without permission, addressing the director with a strangely formal title. Edel, ignoring her protest, introduces the girl to Edel. "This is my granddaughter Alice," he announces. Alice's face froze, she was expecting this. The director continued, saying he wanted Alice to look after the newly transferred Edel. He had already placed them in the same class, and asked Edel to turn to her for help if needed. While Alice, embarrassed, loudly protested against such an arrangement. He waved off her complaints, and sternly told her not to make decisions without consulting him. Alice accusatorily pointed a finger at Edel and cut off, saying he doesn't even have a single friend yet. When the director turns to leave, Alice shouts that their conversation is not over. He simply tells Edel that Alice is a bit strange, but he should try to get along with her before he leaves. She sighed despairingly. Edel, trying to be polite amid this confusion, introduces himself. "I don't really understand what's going on here, but nice to meet you, Alice." Alice, now focused on the book, tells him that their rooms are next to each other, he should just knock if he needs anything, and adds that she already has a question for him. His looking up, she notices how strange he is. Edel, embarrassed, can only respond confusedly before asking his question, "What is a friend?" Alice says that a friend is a close companion, not family. Edel turns this over in his head and concludes that his late grandfather must have been his friend, and the realization of how truly lonely he is overwhelms Alice. She freezes and cannot utter a word. Her patient finally breaks down. She pushes Edel from the threshold, shouting for him to go away, and he retreats, stumbling, completely bewildered by her sudden outburst of anger and not understanding what could have made her so angry. He stands alone in the narrow corridor, the door tightly closed right in front of him. He mutters under his breath, complaining about the poor security of the building. His thoughts cling to the building itself, a huge complex that hides many students under the night sky. And with a bitter heart, he imagines how many victims there could be in such a cramped, poorly guarded place. Not ready to rely on chance, he decides to play it safe and make some changes for his own protection. Returning to his room, he gets to work. A complex magical sign materializes on the floor, glowing with arcane energy as he pours his power into it. The energy bursts out of the circle and weaves a protective barrier across the door. He exhales, satisfied with what he has done. The protective field, he thinks, is powerful enough to repel an attack from a creature like Bahamut, and with the trap set, no one will slip through. This should be enough for now. Now that his security is in place, he feels easier. The fear of an attack no longer weighs on his thoughts, and he is finally safe. Here, his thoughts immediately jump to something else. He remembers being told classes are to start tomorrow, but the very concept is completely unfamiliar to him, and he has no idea what classes are. Meanwhile, in the neighboring room, Alice lies awake in bed, her face full of irritation. She sighs and wonders what that new neighbor is up to. So, she lies in bed, and all her thoughts are about the new neighbor Edel. Dealing with people is already hard for her, and she cannot imagine how she could get along with someone so devoid of common sense. Her disappointment deepens. She mutters that he will never understand her feelings and, exhausted, decides to just go to sleep, but the thought remains in her head. Probably, he has no friends at all. But as soon as she settled in, a sudden dull knock from the next room scared her. She sat up in bed, her body now bare, and fearfully asks where that noise came from. Curiosity overcame fatigue, so she approached the door. Looking through the peephole, she saw a strange, swirling distortion where Edel's door should be, and thought that she needed to him. Suddenly, Edel stands in her room, having completely bypassed the door. Around him disperses watery magical energy. He looks at her with sincere surprise and asks why she is undressed. He raises the source of his intrusion, a small glowing compass spinning from power. Alice at the door can only stare, her mouth agape from complete shock at his sudden appearance. Her shock instantly turns into rage. As if through the lens of his magical device, she extends her hand forward and lets out a furious scream, calling him a pervert. Elf shudders, completely bewildered by her reaction. The force of her scream seems to physically push him back. He recoils, and a sudden realization overtakes him. He made a terrible mistake. He used the maximum of his power. He raises his hand, making a pitiful attempt to explain that he did knock. Alice, however, is stunned by something else. She froze in horror and demanding asks how he managed to bypass her protection. Having survived this, she rushed back to the bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, her face a mask of rage and shame. She screamed for him not to look at her, and Edel just stood frozen, eyes wide open in horror at his own blood. Downstairs, he froze, and Alice, clutching her clothes, boils. She wonders to herself who he is, that he so easily bypasses her protective magic and passes through that. From behind the door he peeks out, pressing a pillow to himself as a shield, and stammering whispers an apology. He looked completely FL. Embarrassed, he even went out completely, pleading with her not to be so absorbed. He was bursting with anger. The past flashed through his mind. He remembered how once he and his grandfather walked around the house naked and didn't even think about it. And he can't understand why she is so upset. Upset, he realized the matter was too delicate, so he decided to postpone his questions until the next. The next morning he finds Alice, greets her, notices that she is already in uniform, but immediately worries about the dark circles under her eyes and asks, "What happened?" She does not answer him directly. Instead, she slumps over the table from exhaustion. She admits that because of someone she was on alert all night and did not sleep at all. Adele apologizes, trying to explain that in the demon world where he lived, it was normal to pass through walls and no one. She sharply raised her head in disbelief. Exclaiming in shock, she still has to admit, if this is the demon world, such a strange habit can quite be considered normal. The same thought still confuses her. To her, pulling him to herself, she sternly warns him not to tell anyone about what happened. When he asks why, she simply replies that it does not matter. It does not matter why. She turns and moves forward, telling him she will explain everything on the way to class because he probably knows nothing about the lessons. She gives the last strict order. If he wants to avoid trouble, he must definitely follow the. He was walking behind Alice down the corridor of the academy, and she began to explain that the Hero Academy is a 6-year institution, and the entire first year is devoted to instilling basic knowledge into every student. These basics taught everything that any hero might need, from adventures and history to art, mathematics, magic, and combat techniques. Continuing, Alice added that in the first year one homeroom teacher teaches students almost everything, and they all study together as one class. And it was then she stopped announcing that they had arrived. She pointed to the open doors of the large lecture hall. "This is our auditorium," she said, noting that the teacher had already been called. They called him. When they went inside, the teacher with glasses and a professional appearance sharply clapped her hands to silence everyone and told them all to sit down. And when Edel stood at the front, whispers spread among the students, and someone said that he must be extraordinarily talented because the transfer exam is known as extraordinarily. It was difficult. Then she officially announced that a new student who had transferred would join them, and Alice confirmed to the curious classmates that it was indeed Edel. For a brief, tense moment, a strange thought flashed through the teacher's mind to imitate a dog, and she imagined how the students someone would have reacted by shaking off the strange impulse. The teacher pulled herself together and asked Edel to introduce himself to the class. He stepped forward. "Hi. I am Edel," he said, waving his hand. "I still don't really understand this school, but I will be in under your care." When he modestly admitted that he knew nothing, a student nearby quietly whispered to his friend, "He doesn't know about the school. Even commoners go to elementary school. He probably came from some real back the village of Blackwater." However, Edel refuted the assumption that hung in the room. "That's not it," he said calmly. In the demon world, this statement hung in the air and echoed with a wave of stunned silence. Across the room, his new classmates, including Alice, looked at him with wide, shocked eyes. Eyes full of shock, he stood in stunned silence, truly puzzled. "Why did everyone suddenly become so quiet?" he asked aloud. Nearby, Alice propped her chin with her hand, her face showing pure irritation. She thought about how she had warned him. At the front of the room, the teacher could only hide her face in disbelief. The heavy silence suddenly broke with a loud, explosive laugh that echoed. Something swept through the class. "Hey, what kind of joke is this?" the teacher sharply called out. The sudden noise frightened Edel. His eyes opened wide in surprise, and he, along with the surprised Alice, turned aside. A commotion. From the last row, a student with spiky light hair stood up, and a mocking smile stretched across his face as he met Edel's gaze. "So you came from the demon world, right?" He was mocking. He instantly closed the distance, leaned in so that he was face to face with Edel, and his voice dripped with contempt. "Do you want to make fools of us? What is this sudden solo act?" In the large multi-level auditorium of the Academy of Heroes, a student with spiky hair decisively walks down the aisle, and his heavy steps echo. He stops by Edel's desk and addresses the teacher, loudly asking if it is true that Edel came from the demonic world. The teacher immediately tries to stop him, ordering the student Jazer to be quiet. Next to Edel, Alice looks anxiously and quietly says that, unfortunately, she cannot answer that question. Jazer gave a crooked smile at that evasive answer, was not discouraged, and calmly said that he would check everything himself later. Ignoring his comment, the teacher turns her attention to Edel, points to an empty desk, and tells him that the seat next to Alice is free. And when Edel looks at his new place, Jazer snorts disdainfully. Having just sat next to Alice, Edel immediately found himself opposite Jazer. He turned in his chair and looked at them. Alice leaned over and quietly warned Edel that the problematic student had targeted him and it was better to keep away, but Edel only looked puzzled. Then the teacher begins the history lesson. She writes on the board and explains that the Kingdom of Rhodes flourished thanks to the cooperation of the nobility, and at that time Gilzerin II had enormous power. While the lecture drones on in its monotonous voice, Edel and Alice seem to have switched off, lost in their own thoughts. Noticing his state, Alice slid him a book and explained that it was a preparatory text with most of the key information. He should read it so that no questions would be asked later, and then she asked, "Can you even read those letters?" He reassures her and says that his grandfather taught him magic that reads by itself. A glowing glyph appears in his eye, and Alice shockingly admits that she has never heard of such a spell. When Edel looks intently at the open book, the magic works. His eyes widen in absolute shock, and the classroom around seems to distort as he realizes what he has read. He looks into the history textbook and calmly says that he has almost memorized it, and Alice next to him, with wide-open eyes, does not believe it and asks if he is lying. In response to her doubt, he asks if she also uses some kind of memory magic. To test him, she asks him to name the king from 5 generations ago, and he correctly says without hesitation, Dilip III, thereby proving his point. She, stunned, frankly says that his natural gift is even more amazing than magic, and Edel calmly explains that he just learned it the usual way. Intrigued, Alice asks to see other textbooks, wondering how many he can remember. Edel sits at the table and quickly flips through a large stack of books. Later that day, an announcement was made throughout the entire territory of the academy, apologizing for the sudden change. A group of students, along with Alice, burst into joyful cries, and the girl with short light hair explained that the martial arts class was replaced with independent practice because the instructor had to urgently deal with a matter that could not be postponed. The same girl approaches Edel, calls him by name and says that with excellent medics nearby, minor wounds are not scary, and looking at the training sword adds that although it is made of iron, it is a real dangerous weapon. With a radiant smile, she calls herself Tina and invites Edel to practice together with her and her friends. Edel asks in shock if she is really talking about him, and Tina just nods, as if he seems to have no partner. He watches as the group prepares their swords. Suddenly the thought occurs, if he really lives in a world of demons, just swinging a sword in training would be boring, so he decides to match the opponent's level. While he hesitates, Tina challenges him to a light sparring match. Edel notes to himself that his sword is hidden in the subspace but still decides to agree. Tina gives him one last stern warning. During sparring with another student, he must definitely hold back. She stands ready with a training sword in her hands and tells Edel that she is ready to start as soon as he is. Edel calmly agrees, and nearby Alice watches and quietly whispers to another student that the newcomer is about to spar with Tina. Announcing her confidence, she decides to make the first move. A momentan she disappears, only to instantly appear right behind Edel. The observing students immediately recognize her signature disappearance with lightning-fast movement and whisper that it is hard for a novice to counter this. But he reacts instantly. Without turning, he raises his sword over his shoulder and perfectly intercepts her strike from above with a sharp clang of steel. Her eyes widened in shock when the blade suddenly got stuck. She let out a muffled sound of irritation, not believing that he had parried her attack without even looking, and the other students watching also froze and fell silent. He continues to block her next strikes, still turned with his back to her. The spectators are completely confused and loudly ask how he manages this. Legs, watching, Alice is increasingly amazed. She understands that he not only neutralized her magic yesterday, but now also deflects the barrage of Tina's attacks without even turning to face her. She asks herself, what must one go through in the demonic world to master such abilities, and who is he really? Distracted from the duel, he glanced over his shoulder at the spectators and calmly invited everyone to join as if saying, you can attack him whenever you want. The brazen proposal left Alice and the other students speechless. After a moment, Alice barked that he would regret those words. Taking this as a new challenge, Tina jumps back to create distance. She and Edel now stand face to face, ready for a fight that just became much bigger. He does not retreat from the students' pressure, his face unchanged. With one smooth movement, he parries Tina's downward strike, easily deflecting her training sword. The ease of his defense simply baffles the spectators. Tina looks with wide-open eyes and exclaims that he deflected all their attacks, while Alice and another student are equally stunned, whispering in amazement. The sharp sounds of the one-sided fight attract the attention of other students. They peek from around the corner, their faces full of shock at what is happening on the field. Courtyard, in a moment the confrontation ended. The academy director Marable stands among the fallen students, while Tina, Alice, and the dark-haired girl lie on the ground, gasping from exhaustion, admitting this is impossible because Edel is simply too strong. Powerfully, gasping, Alice lifts her eyes to him, a drop of sweat shining on her temple. She asks how he manages to move like that. Edel just smiles and says that this is his victory. Victory? He explains that compared to his past trials, this is nothing. He recalls fighting monsters in the demon world that had 100 hands, and this memory flashes in his mind as he speaks. His casual mention of the demon world makes him pause for a moment. But Alice from this revelation simply loses her footing. She screams in disbelief, asks if he is joking, and then with shock realizes that he was completely Lee. Her shock quickly turned into keen curiosity. Alice, eager to hear more about his adventures, suggested everyone go for tea, and Tina and the other girl gladly agreed. They exclaimed that it was great and nudged the boy from the demon world so that he co. As they were preparing to leave, suddenly a mocking voice cut through. A student with spiky hair mockingly said that the boy from the demon world attracts all the girls, added that he himself would jump in there, and Alice glared fiercely at him. Irritated, he continues to tease from afar, telling friends to leave the outcast from some remote village alone. Geyser crossed his arms and admitted that although it is annoying, Edel clearly has real power. Alice tells Edel not to pay attention to him, explaining that nobles always behave arrogantly like. He smiles, calms the new companions, says don't worry, and explains that in the demon world he was often attacked instantly as soon as his gaze met a creature. So he got used to such hostility. His words, however, barely ease the tension. Nearby, Geyser's friends whisper. One says how creepy Edel's comment sounded. Another notices that even Geyser, from a famous family of swordsmen and considered the next ace of the fencing club, looks shaken, and Alice and Tina look at what might. With anxiety, the comment reaches Geyser, and his face darkens with rage. When another student says that Edel could actually easily defeat him, Geyser sharply turns around, his face distorted by a roar. What did you just say? TGR. He growls, and the rage instantly turns into mocking laughter. His henchmen jump up nearby, spitting on the idea that Geyser could lose to some provincial. One reminds that Geyser himself saw Edel defeat Tina, the senior of their club, and seeing this, Geyser throws a direct challenge. If you are so sure, fight me. He approaches Edel, demanding to settle this here and now. Sighing, Edel covers his face, resigned. All right, he agrees, adding that he hopes this will be the end of it. It will end quickly. In response, Geyser draws a formidable sword with a wide blade. The crowd begins to gather, buzzing with excitement. Alice watches, frightened, regretting that Edel was targeted. Other students decide to watch the spectacle, because a rumor spread about the upcoming duel between the newcomer student and Geyser. Tina's eyes widened with anxiety. She recognized the blade and shouted, "Wait, Geyser's sword, it seems to be made of mithril." Because she understood, a blade of such hardness would effortlessly break an ordinary steel sword. Easily, he grins boldly, raising the superior weapon, and mockingly adds, "There are no rules that say which sword I can or cannot use. There is an advantage." Unmoved, Edel calmly raises an ordinary training sword. "It's okay," he says, "no special difference. It's not a sacred sword or a demon blade." Geyser sees this as an established rule of their duel. Ignorant, he thinks, swearing to break the opponent's blade and barely death. With the last arrogant statement, he lunges forward. "As a nobleman, I will deal with that simpleton from the remote village," he shouts. "You should be crying with gratitude." Posture, with a triumphant roar, he brings down his mithril sword, aiming to break the opponent's blade, and the loud clang of steel on steel echoes, followed clearly by the clink. Metal, confident that he has it, he smiled sinisterly and declared that with this strike the opponent's sword is now completely split in half, and only remains to finish him off. Turned him into mush. A comrade shouted his name excitedly, but Geyser waved off that interruption with a contemptuous laugh, still enjoying his imaginary. Having won, he suddenly fell silent, laughter caught in his throat. Something was wrong, and his triumphant smile instantly turned into wide-eyed disbelief. Leaving him in shock, the source of this fear stands before him completely unharmed. Edel firmly holds his standard saber, the blade perfectly intact, and quietly notes the absurdity. Geyser's gaze dropped from Edel's sword to his own, and to his horror, he saw that the tip of his beloved mithril blade was shattered. He stammered and spoke the incredible truth. It was his own sword. The sword broke, and the spectators erupted in disbelief. One student shouted that the newcomer was incredible. Another yelled that he broke Geyser's sword with an ordinary mass-produced blade. Even Alice, who expected Edel's blade to break, stood speechless, and the weight of humiliation fell on Geyser, and he collapsed. Dropping to his knees, Geyser looks at the ground completely broken and not understanding what he is dealing with, while Edel looks at him with a cold, analytical gaze. The strength of the transferred student simply stuns. When the duel ended, Edel stands over the fallen Geyser, and behind him Tina, Alice, and another student watch the outcome. Lying on the ground, Geyser looks at him mockingly, his legs stubbornly planted nearby, and challenges, "Do you want to continue the fight?" Edel is silent as Geyser pushes himself to his knees, irritation and disbelief mixed on his face. And inside he boils with the thought that Edel was completely defenseless during their battle, a fatal mistake that could have cost him his life in the demon world. A fist clenched against the stone floor, he grits his teeth and admits, "This is my defeat." Edel calmly accepts the surrender, and nearby Tina joyfully exclaims that it was a stunning victory. The crowd of spectators began mocking Geyser's humiliation. They laugh that he lost to such a sword, and they guffaw because he cheated and still lost. One of his comrades runs up to help, but Geyser fiercely pushes him aside, growling for him to get out of his way. Ignoring the noise, cheerful Tina grabs Edel's hand and suggests that since it's already late, they all go together to have some tea. Alice and another girl enthusiastically agree, both saying in unison that they want to get to know Adele better. He glanced for a moment at the impatient group, suddenly remembered something, apologized and said he had business and couldn't go, then unexpectedly offered Alice to eat with him instead, and she froze in surprise. Later in the student dormitory, Geyser's hidden rage finally explodes. He punches the stone wall of the building and breaks it, boiling with anger that he was defeated by a commoner. He looks at the hole in the wall, refusing to believe it. He thinks that his own sword should never have broken from a simple steel blade. His disbelief turns into rage. He is convinced that Edel conspired with those girls to humiliate him, and giving in, vows never to forgive. With the sword in hand, he sneaks down the dormitory corridor, swearing to take revenge for this humiliation tenfold, and says to his invisible opponent, "Just wait, you'll see." He freezes before certain doors, making sure this is the room of his target. As the first step of revenge, he decided to smash it to pieces. Roaring with fury, he kicks the door off its hinges. The wood shatters into splinters. He bursts into the room and sees it completely empty, snorting mockingly, wondering why the boy has nothing. Takes a step forward, his foot steps right on a glowing magical sign carved into the floor. Elsewhere, Edel opened his eyes wide in surprise when he heard an unexpected sound. He stands alone in the boundless dark void and does not understand why everything around has suddenly changed. In the dormitory room, Geyser screams in pain and confusion. Magic envelops him and pulls him into the unknown, and he demands to know what is happening. The chaotic transfer ended, and Edel found himself sitting on the cold stone floor of a prison cell. His sword lay nearby, and looking around utter bewilderment, he wondered where he had ended up. Trapped, Geyser finds himself in a cell with stone walls. He grabs the bars and shakes them in vain. Realizing escape is impossible, screams in despair and wonders through which hole he fell and what this place is, which should not exist under the academy. His angry screams are answered only by a quiet, barely trembling sound. He turns and sees a small, slimy creature on the floor of the cell. Annoyed, he brushes it away, dismissing it as a simple, weak monster, and is angry that it scared him. Considering the creature just a nuisance, Geyser draws his sword and with a furious cry, "Die!" rushes forward to kill the creature. His blade flashed through the air, aimed straight at this seemingly defenseless line. The sword caught, but instead of cutting, it bounced off the strangely hard slime body with a dull thud. The blow shook Geyser's hand, and he recoiled in shock, exclaiming how hard it was. Before he could withdraw the weapon, the gelatinous slime began to wrap around the blade, and to his horror, the metal seemed to dissolve, absorbing into the creature's mask. He looks confused at his empty palm. What is this slime? He thinks, and from the darkness a calm voice says that this is not just slime but a favorite that was long nurtured. Startled by the unexpected voice, Geyser sharply turns around, now with his back to the bars, staring into the darkness beyond the cell, and exclaims, "Who's there? Is anyone there?" In response, a single foot steps out of the shadow. A boot tears the silence on the stone floor. The figure fully emerges into the light, revealing Edel perfectly composed, standing outside the cage. While Geyser, not believing his eyes, fiercely demands to know who Edel is and what kind of strange room this is. He calmly stroked the creature, explaining to the trapped Geyser that it was a voracious slime, a popular pet in the demonic world, and even revealed that the prison itself was a subspace created by him, while Geyser stammered in disbelief, having never heard of such a slime. Slime? Edel easily winked and added that although slimes are fashionable in the demonic world, they often end up eating their owners, and this tease hit a sore spot. Geyser's surprise instantly turned into rage when he realized the true danger he was in. Edel's playfulness vanished, replaced by an icy gleam in her eyes. He explained in detail that this slime had absorbed a huge amount of adamantite and hardened its body to the hardness of the legendary metal, then added that it easily dissolves bones, so if it devours Geyser, no trace will remain. Stay, the terrible truth crushed Geyser. He was trapped in an unknown place. His grandfather's warning surfaced in his mind that his actions would lead to his removal, and the irony to be eliminated as a commoner he despised pulled him into the spiral of the tape. Horror, looking down into the cell, Edel's voice was emotionless. He said he was taught a simple rule: never, under any circumstances, allow the enemy escape. His arguments were chillingly pragmatic. A close-up of his eye reflected the frightened figure of Geyser as he explained that letting him go would only invite future revenge. A quiet step sounded on the floor. A hand reached forward, and a piercing high scream of pure terror began to fill the cramped space. In the massive academy building, the scream echoed faintly, a desperate voice lost within its walls. In another classroom, a thin, sharp sound cut through the silence. Alice lifted her head from the desk. A drop of sweat blossomed on her temple. She was seized by unease, and nearby Geyser's usual companion also twitched nervously, clearly hearing something amid that silence. The scene settled, and in the frame appeared Edel at his desk. While Shin, resting his chin on his hand, looked completely bored, nearby a new student with neat light hair cast a glance and a question flashed in his eyes. Who is this per? This man cheerfully says that he is Geyser, wishes good morning to both Edel and the surprised Tina. Edel remains sitting motionless, and Tina recoils from the unexpected friendly greeting from someone who was previously aggressive. Student, to this, Tina just looks, not believing her eyes. Tells Edualu that he seems like a completely different person and wonders what could have happened. Embarrassed, she apologizes for her rudeness. Earlier, however, Geyser only smiles calmly and explains that his grandfather taught him not to kill enemy opponents, but to train them so that everyone could get along. The word train leaves Tina completely confused. He announces that Edel spared him, and now he will dedicate his life to serving him so that no enemy slips away. Alice, who is eavesdropping nearby, nervously sweats, thinking to herself that he has gone too far. When the students quietly whisper among themselves, Alice advises Geyser that perhaps it is better not to use the word train, and he simply asks if that is so. Edel turns to Alice and asks what she thinks he did to Geyser. She admits that now she is a little afraid of him, but Edel calmly replies that he is only disciplining them a little. Their teacher, overhearing the exchange, sharply intervenes. She says that disciplined is just another word for trained and does not change the meaning, comparing this attitude. Training a dog. Just at that moment, the school bell rang. The end of classes, and Geyser immediately started talking about extracurricular clubs, asked Adele which club he plans to join, and suggested going to take a look. Gathering them together, he proudly puffs out his chest and declares that they expect him to become the future ace of the fencing club, then turns back to Edel and asks which clubs exactly. To this, Tina, a little confused, begins to list the most famous clubs: Martial Arts Club, Dual Club, Arts Club, and Marksmanship Club, then turns to Alice and asks if she says that she has not yet joined any club, and Edel immediately suggests going together to look, saying maybe she will manage to find some friends. Her face burns with indignation. She shouts that she will never become his replacement and will never be able to be friends with his other companions. Edel is stunned by her outburst, and Alice looks coldly and warns that if those girls are Edel's friends, she will throw them in the same place where she threw Tina. Tina yesterday, although she spoke sharply, a blush spreads across Alice's face. She reluctantly agrees to go with them, but in her soul, it seems to her that her connection with Edel is much closer to the real F. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by Geyser, who cheerfully announced that they had arrived at the club's west side. The building, he gestures widely, looking around the large domed hall they entered, and asks Edel if he noticed any particular club. This interested him. Alice quickly explained that here students do not kill each other, after which Edel thoughtfully asked if they fight until someone's kin disappears. And Geyser, catching the moment, offered to take them through all the clubs and be their guide, adding that the dueling club is very simple. Approaching first, Geyser pushes the door aside and loudly announces that the transferred student, his brother, has come for a trial lesson, and from inside turns a large, bald, burly man. He turns back to them. He explains that this is the Martial Arts Club, a place for hand-to-hand combat training without weapons or magic. The hall is a gym with training equipment, such as a punching bag and dumbbells. Edel looks around the scene and notices that he is called the very transferred student about whom rumors circulate. A barely noticeable smile plays on his lips. He thinks to himself that this might. The muscular man scrutinizes Edel's physique and notes how weak he is. He acknowledges that he is only a freshman and assures that with persistent training, having a body like his is not an impossible dream. Edel raises his eyes to this formidable figure, and a slight anxiety appears in him. On his face, before him, the martial arts master clenched a bandaged fist, and the sound of rapping and tightening rang out, emphasizing the tension. It was part of the challenge. He smiled and said that observation is not enough. If there is a chance, he would gladly meet Edel in a live fight. Demonstration. The next moment, a blurred movement and a powerful blow threw the master backward. Through the air, he fell to the ground with a crash, covered in bruises and stunned, while the other club members rushed to him and anxiously called their senior, Babaruk, to find out if he was fine. Outside the dojo, a flustered Alice explained to Edel that she had only held back enough not to kill him. Geyser, nervously sweating, quickly urged them to move on. The next stop was another club room, where an equally strange scene unfolded. A student hung in a large net while another calmly painted a portrait of a small creature, and Edel and Alice stood at the back of the room staring. In disbelief, Edel's attention was drawn to the frantic commotion spilling from another room. He, stunned, pointed as Geyser and another student ran past him. People were fleeing the scene. Peering into the door marked Shooting Club, Edel saw a student with glasses sobbing and begging them to just go home, and he recoiled, overwhelmed by the emotion. An explosion of emotions. Geyser rushed to explain the situation and insisted to the surprised Edel that he was not the direct cause, instead claiming that Edel's presence somehow broke the spirit. Club members. If Edel Pendrada were expelled for breaking a target, Alice said would consider it predictable and think that club activities were difficult. And at that moment, a young woman with long dark hair approached and asked if they They were frantically searching for the club when a student with a confident smile approached them. She introduced herself as Selena, was in her 4th year, and headed one of the clubs. Pointing directly at Edel, she explained that she had passed by earlier and was very interested in their group, especially him. And Edel, Alice, and Geyser just froze in surprise. Startled by the sudden attention, she continued her speech, noting that an ordinary club seemed insufficient to satisfy them. Her gaze fixed on Edel, and she declared with absolute confidence that her club would never let anyone with such strength be bored. Intrigued by this confidence, Edel asked what kind of club SH. That was exactly what she was talking about. A passionate smile appeared on Selena's face. With a flourish, she unfurled a large scroll and proclaimed that her club was. In a word, in the Dungeon Exploration Club, the parchment showed a complex map detailing winding corridors and chambers under. The announcement hung in the air and caught the trio by surprise. Alice, eyes wide open in disbelief, spoke first. Her voice, full of shock and confusion, repeated, "Dungeon Exploration." Under the sign Dungeon Exploration, Selena suggested taking a different path. The visibility here is very poor. While she was speaking, Maribel appeared in the door nearby and loudly called out to attract everyone's attention. Selena noticed her arrival, turned around and asked for a moment of their attention, saying that she had brought several new students on a tour and pointing to Edel, Alice, and another boy, while the words Dungeon Exploration echoed in Edel's mind. Waving her hand widely towards the ancient ruins, Selena announced that this world is filled with countless dungeons. She pressed close to Edel and quietly explained that the main business of the school is to storm these places only with the students' forces, and she would tell all the details later in the club room. Although he was brought here against his will, Edel's attention instantly changed. He looked intently around the corner, more concerned about the person he sensed hidden there. He turned back to Selena and she smiled and said it was strange how he noticed that hidden presence, especially when she was being suppressed. Her words suddenly surprised another student. He asked skeptically if someone was really here, admitting that he saw no one. Hiding, Maribel froze in horror. She thought she had seen a shadow, but with shock realized she had been discovered, even though she was using concealment techniques. When Selena called for the one who was hiding to come out, Edel immediately rushed to Maribel and declared that she had been spying on him during lunch, during his introduction, and even on the training field. Maribel, embarrassed, panicked, and denied, exclaiming that he was calling her a stalker, but Edel insisted that she really was there. The young woman who was stalking him apologized for being late, introduced herself as Rin, a shinobi from the east, and explained that she had a reason to follow him. She confessed that she had heard a rumor that he was the 5th secret grandson of the director, and she was going to uncover the truth. Edel sharply replied that her methods were suspicious, and Rin shuddered at this. Edel, returning to his friends, waved his hand and declared that if there were real evil here, he would deal with it himself. Nearby, Rin quietly worries that if this continues, she will be called a pervert. Wounded, his indifferent waving makes Selena scream in alarm, and he calmly tells her to calm down and listen, assuring that he has already figured out the situation while his gloved hand lies on the map. He pointed to a place on the map, changed the subject, and announced that the club would go for 2 days and 1 night to explore the dungeon near the city on the upcoming weekend. On the weekend, noticing the chance, Selena suggests, since everyone is here, let Edel, Alice, and her friend join the expedition, and assures that gathering supplies for 3 more is within their power. Edel immediately says that he wants to go. Alice looks uncertain and embarrassed, stammering as she tries to answer, and Selena looks at her, waiting for a response. After a moment, Alice decisively declares that she will go, and police officer Selena confirms with a smile the decision is made. Ready? The plan is for 7 in the morning on the weekend, and their next challenge is the ancient thousand-year ruins. Ahead are ruins built 1,000 years ago, which have turned into a dungeon teeming with monsters. Although it is considered low-level, conquering it is by no means easy. On the day of the expedition, Selena addresses the gathered students and explains that although their club has already passed through these ruins, this trip requires exactly those people and good preparation. Edel stands among the group, listening attentively and silently agreeing with her words. She gestures to the dungeon map and, noticing that only 2 days have passed, advises moving to the middle layer. But her voice becomes serious. The dungeon's structure can change over time, so these surveys must be conducted regularly. Hearing this, Edel does not hide his surprise and asks if the plan really changes every time someone enters. Selena just laughs and waves it off, saying it's just an exaggeration. Near the stone entrance to the ruins, the leader announced that 23 participants would be divided into 4 teams of 5 or 6 people. And Edel could not help but be surprised at how different this was from the dungeons of the demon world. The team was quickly formed. Selena announced that she and Geyser, a skilled fighter from the fencing club, would be the vanguard. Alice was sent to the rear to cover against magical attacks, Rin for reconnaissance. When she looked at Edel, his role was defined, and Edel watched attentively, considering the arrangement. He nods, admitting that he himself does not yet know what he is capable of. He accepts his duty to support the others. A dull rumble comes from the entrance. They are preparing to move. Five students Selena, Geyser, Alice, Edel, and Rin step into the ancient stone corridors. Walking into the darkness, Selena notes that monsters should soon be expected to appear. Soon she turns to the scout and quietly whispers to Rin whether she feels the presence of a monster. Rin simply raises a finger to her lips in response, signaling to be silent. The shinobi froze, her attention absolute. From her slowly spread a barely audible circular wave of energy that rolled over the ancient stones as she surveyed the nearby area. She looks back at the group and says that there is nothing yet. When Edel doubts, she points to the fork and explains that she feels one creature approaching from the right and another further along the same path. And when Edel asks if she really senses all this, she responds with a simple gesture. Her warning came true almost immediately. With a heavy dull rumble, a huge creature with the head of a bull, a minotaur, burst into the corridor, letting out a guttural roar. Comrade? When the beast appeared, Selena looked at Rin, amazed that she had sensed its approach from afar, and Rin simply confirmed that the minotaur really had a stone. They arrived. Before they could make a plan, Geyser stepped forward, confronted the monster, and decisively said that this was not the time for talk, it was time to kill the beast. Feast, he rushed forward, boasting that he alone was more than enough for this enemy. His weapon sliced the minotaur's jaw, and the beast roared in pain and surprise. Price, the warrior did not retreat, he intensified the pressure, knocked the monster's hand away, and delivered another fierce blow to the head, causing the beast to stumble backward. While Geyser was busy, Rin's watchful eyes noticed something else. She urgently shouted to Selena and Edel, warning them to beware of a trap on the wall she had just discovered. Selena appreciated her impressive perception. Perception, she looked more closely and confirmed. It really was there. It was a mechanism not mentioned in any previous inspections, and she was eager to find out if it had been installed very recently. Installed, her discovery made Selena warn Edel to step back. They did not know what this trap could do, and Rin thought that noticing a device even experts had missed was damn impressive. Defeat, but he completely ignored the warning. To the horror of the entire team, Edel calmly approached the wall and placed his hand directly on the trap's trigger plate. Alice and the others shouted, asking when the world in which he just waved his hand toward his feet, ordering them to look, and told a strange lesson from his grandfather. Traps should be met head-on, not avoided. His bizarre logic left his comrades guessing what kind of grandfather he was. The trap he activated comes to life. A huge boulder detaches from the ceiling and rushes down the narrow passage straight at Alice, Rin, and Selena. They screamed in terror as it approached. Down on them. Despite the immediate danger, he remains completely still, looking with a calm expression. Seeing his inaction, Selena shouts at him from afar, asking if he has a death wish. She panically points toward the side passage, begging him to hide, but Edel instead extends his hand and places it on the surface of the rushing boulder. And realization flashes across his face, while Alice and Selena watch stunned. Silence? The moment his hand touched it, the massive sphere crumbled into countless fragments, and his companions looked at the pile of debris with disbelief, not understanding what had just happened to the giant boulder. Boulder, his comrade rushes to him, asks if he is okay, and scolds him for such recklessness. Selena, with a mixture of anger and confusion on her face, demands to know how he did it, saying the material clearly did not seem like frivolous. Despite their fears, Edel turned and headed toward the dark opening that had appeared where the boulder was. He told them to wait, and his comrade shouted for him to stop, realizing it was a hidden path. He gestures into the darkness, explains that he was not reckless, and asks them to look. Rin gasped at what she saw, and another student muttered irritably about Edel running away. He himself, his gesture reveals a large wooden chest standing alone in a hidden recess. The blonde student's irritation instantly turns into admiration. He exclaims that this is a treasure chest, and with burning impatience suggests that they open it, but Edel remains cautious and calmly says that it is probably a mimic. The companion looks around, confused, asks what a mimic is, and honestly admits that he has never seen one. He has heard of one. Before you can get an answer, the chest lid suddenly flips open, revealing not treasure but a huge maw studded with razor-sharp teeth. The student lets out a frightened scream, jumps back in shock. The mimic crumbled into a cloud of wooden splinters, and Selena, watching this, could not believe her own eyes, while another noticed that the creature stupidly crashed into the wall after. After it jumped out, the others were still processing what had happened, and Edel thought to himself. To them it might have looked like he just waved it off and hit the monster, but the strangest thing for him was the fact that he was a transferred student. Nearby, the blonde student was sweating and still stunned from his. That was a close call. He turns back to Edel, clearly disappointed, and laments, it was a pity to find a hidden passage only to turn out to be a dud. Edel calmly corrects him, explaining that it is more likely a mechanism designed to make them think it was a trap. The confused student asked what he meant. What he means by that, with a sly smile at Al, simply says, "This is what I mean." Suddenly, Edel pushes the blonde student forward. The rest of the group raises an alarm and shouts not to push so unexpectedly, and the student yells that he is about to crash into the newly appeared stone wall. Instead of a collision, the student and Alice, who was right behind him, passed through it as if it were an illusion. They slid to the floor in a new corridor, shouting from rough The student looked back, confused, and saw Edel on the other side of the wall, which now looked truly solid. Edel smiled, confirming that it was a trick, and the interested student said he wanted to. Try again? He presses against the stone with all his might, groaning from the effort, but the stone remains completely solid. Suddenly, he is struck by the realization this is impossible. Turn back, the whole group now stands in a huge, dark shelter. A blonde student shouts in disbelief, and Edel Komi explains to the stunned Selina that the wall leads only one way, confirming their horror there is no retreat. A gloved hand rests on the rough stone wall of the cave. The way back is sealed. The realization breaks through there is nowhere to retreat. At the edge of the ledge, Edel peers into the cave and aloud wonders how he can even gather himself with the others again. Selina stands nearby, she catches his attention. She calmly says that this trap was probably set by the demon world, and Edel jumps back in shock and, not believing his ears, insists that she just said demon world, confused by her composure, while she is simply asking if it was mentioned before. She continues the analysis and understands. This path is most likely a shortcut to the lowest level of the dungeon, and the only way out, she decides, is to defeat the boss there and return to the surface through an automatic portal. Her attention instantly returns to the practical matter. She asks Edel where their luggage is. In response, he gestures nearby, where a dark swirling vortex has materialized, and explains that the luggage is inside it. In a moment, Edel has rejoined Alice and Rin. Alice looks at him with disbelief and asks where he just came from. He says it was a subspace, and she exclaims in amazement that it is magic of an incredibly high level. Rin, as always practical, notes that the current group composition complicates the way forward, and Selina adds something worse: the food will last only 2 days. When Edel pulls the backpack out of the subspace, Selina notices that Alice is not very impressed by this demonstration of power, and Alice immediately sees a possible solution and asks if he can teleport everyone back to the surface with that ability. He explains that it is not so simple. If the destination is not marked initially, teleportation can go wrong and throw them somewhere else, and Alice, with a confident smile, simply replies that she is used to such risks. To show the danger, he tells how one mistaken calculations can lead to them getting stuck in the ground, even recalling a case when he accidentally teleported inside a monster and had to fiercely break out, and Alice screams in horror at how incredibly dangerous it is. The group stands at the entrance to a dark passage, and Selina, with a determined expression, says that there is no way back, only forward remains. 3 hours have passed since they fell into the dungeon. The students' path was blocked by massive, luxuriously decorated doors. One of them pointed at them and exclaimed with admiration. Feeling that something was wrong, Selina turns to Rin, notices a dangerous smell in the air, and asks the masked girl to scout a request. Rin immediately accepts. She had not yet moved when the heavy doors began to open with a hum. Selina whispered that the situation couldn't be worse, and Alice agreed, while the others, filled with anxiety, just watched as Edel steadfastly moved forward. He instantly disappears through the opening, and the blonde student exclaims that he vanished, joking that he wished he had the power to spy on the girls' bathroom, while from the darkness ahead comes Edel's voice, calming them and saying everything is fine. His words are cut off. A huge armored tail crashes down from the ceiling with a roar. Selina and the blonde student shout in shock, while Edel remains completely calm, only noting that something is falling from above. The monster turned out to be a manticore, and the blonde student noticed in horror that it was clearly larger than usual and had several tails. Selina felt the crowding and oppressive atmosphere of the room, realized it was the boss's chamber, and wondered if this was their last opponent when the beast let out a deafening roar. It lunges forward, its numerous tails raised, ready to strike. In the chaos, Geyser shouts to the others, "Be careful, the stingers are soaked with powerful poison." The blast is too wide to avoid. Alice, drenched in sweat from the effort, realizes with growing horror that she cannot dodge an attack of this scale. She falls to her knees, her head darkening from dizziness. The blonde student collapses nearby, confirming that he feels the same. A chilling thought occurs to Alice. The monster must be dispersing its poison directly into the air. Forced to drop to one knee, Selina fights not to lose consciousness. She thought Rin was far enough to be safe, but the others were in mortal danger, and her thoughts turned to her companion. Where is Edel? At that moment, Edel stands before the manticore, completely unharmed and seemingly utterly unshaken. He calmly stood among the fallen classmates and wondered why they were all lying down, aloud asking how they could remain unharmed after inhaling the poison, indifferently telling the groaning Alice that such a weak substance isn't even considered poison, and boasting that a simple needle prick wouldn't even affect him. The sharp stinger of the manticore's tail pierced the flesh. The poison instantly surged into the wound. Seeing Edel's indifference, the student Geyser, with hair standing on end, shouted in disbelief and demanded to know what he was doing. The monster's sting struck the stone floor, and a dark cloud of its powerful poison splattered from it. He calmly explained to Alice that he had trained to increase resistance and effortlessly neutralizes poison of such a level, and she could only whisper that everything seemed possible with him. He turned back to the others and boldly said that this was a great opportunity to train resistance to poison. although he himself did not intend to do any cleansing magic. Geyser, stunned, shouted at him to use magic immediately, asking if this was really the time for such experiments. Apparently casting a spell, the light-haired apprentice sighed with relief and thanked his older brother. Alice also confirmed that the poison was leaving her body, and Edel noted that inhaling the poisonous smoke briefly was even fun. As soon as they recovered, the manticore lunged forward, raising a huge clawed paw. A voice of Rin broke from the shadows now. And Edel, now holding the dog, responded to the signal, his eyes narrowed, ready to strike. The beast howled in pain as several of its scorpion tails were cut off. Ren, watching from a hiding place, noticed that the creature's skin was too tough, so it was almost impossible to sever all 5 tails, but she reasoned that as long as she remained unnoticed, she could create it. Beginning, her confidence lasted briefly. The enraged Mandecker spun and unleashed a fierce sweeping blow, and Rin held her breath, realizing too late that the beast was attacking from all sides. Attack, she could not believe her eyes, watching a hail of poisonous stings falling from everywhere. Wait, she shouted, realizing that the boss monster had a frightening level of intelligence. Her disbelief instantly turned to surprise when she saw him with a bunch of stings in his hands. She could not help but ask if he really caught them all with his bare hands, and Edel calmly turned to her and simply asked if she was okay. He sharply turned his face to the enraged manticore. The beast growled, as if announcing that it was now his turn to attack, and let out a hoarse roar. In response, Edel rushed forward and grabbed several scorpion-like tails of the manticore before they could contract. Strike, he pulled with great force and tore one of the manticore's tails right from its body. The monster let out a piercing cry of pain, and Rin from the side only stammered that he tore it off with sheer strength, while Edel calmly noted that this was already the second one he had dealt with. Without hesitation, he grabs another limb of the monster and with another burst of wild strength, tears it from the manticore. Now armed with the severed tails of the creature itself, he jumps and swings them like sticks, striking the manticore right on the torso. Its head, the force of the blow was stunning, and the huge beast crashed onto the stone floor with a roar. When the manticore lies defeated, Edel notices a dark sphere of energy curling nearby. He looks at the beast's snout. It has changed color, and he realizes that the creature's own poison is starting to take effect again. Against him, classmates stand in complete astonishment. Geyser shouts in delight, impressed that Edel defeated the boss and secured their path to escape. Alice, not believing her eyes, whispered if they were all awake, not understanding how he alone managed to overcome such a powerful monster. Rin, standing nearby, admits that she herself is beginning to think the same and sharply says back off. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, Alice, Rin, and another student exit through a large passage. Alice looks back anxiously and says that it seems they have ended up in something that looks just like. Looking around the room, suddenly a powerful shock passed through the corridor where Edel and Geyser stood. Geyser screamed in fear about the vibration, and Edel, unfazed, guessed that it was another fight with a boss and asked his companion to prepare him. He himself, while speaking, the stone floor in front of another group of students explodes. A massive, bulky figure made of solid stone, a golem, emerges, confirming that another boss monster really appeared. Rin exclaims that this is by no means an ordinary golem. Selena clenched her teeth in irritation. They have no information about this boss. She notices its cylindrical arms and assumes that it will probably use ranged attacks. Seeing the stranger's anxiety, Edel turns to Alice with a calm look. He offers the teacher a safe way to fight the monster they have never faced before. Alice was quite confused, doubting whether such a method could even exist. Exists? He continues, saying that if there were some universal way of fighting, she would definitely want to know it. He recalls their lessons at the Hero Academy, where they were taught only techniques against monsters described in the manuals, and admits that it is impossible to comprehend the nature of all creatures and, in the world, saying no more, he firmly plants his foot on the ground, bites into the stone and prepares to lunge. He shouted, "Here I am," and rushed straight at the towering stone golem while the monster's glowing eyes fixed on the charging boy. Towards him, and in an instant his fist strikes. One devastating blow shatters the upper part of the golem into a cloud of dust and pebbles, while classmates just stand, wide-eyed in complete disbelief, thinking the same thing. A moment. He turns to them with a bright, cheerful smile. He explains his main strategy: simply defeat the monster before it can attack. He says this is a safe way to handle most. The absurd simplicity of his, yet incredibly effective logic simply stuns Alice and the light-haired student. As the group advanced deeper, Ed El Kamlai encounters a monstrous toothy creature and begins to share his combat philosophy. Namely, against monsters with high defense, it is enough to deliver a blow of greater force. He continues the lesson, saying that with agile monsters you can simply grab them at the moment of attack, demonstrating this with a light gesture, instantly destroying that creature from the morning, and adding that even monsters that vanish are the same. Their image can simply be erased. With a single wrist flick, another beast, large and covered with disheveled fur, dissolves into nothing before it can even move. He turns back to his stunned companion with a bright smile, explaining that such monsters are usually weak, so one broad attack is enough, and cheerfully asks, "Isn't it simple?" Standing before the whole party, he impatiently asks which boss will be next, while his companion thinks to herself that none of his demonstrations help at all. Walking down the stone corridor, Selena screamed in despair, and one of the companions grumbled that this was already the sixth battle and when it would end, when suddenly their path was blocked by a massive figure. Ren recognized it as the Bloody Minotaur, and Selena realized with horror that this was the dungeon's final boss. Alice panicked, not understanding where it came from. She thought this would be the last encounter, but it appeared much earlier. The huge, blood-covered Minotaur loomed over them, its presence oppressive. The beast lets out a terrifying roar. Selena explains that its cry summons a paralyzing fear that cannot be endured without strong spirit, and bitterly adds that under normal circumstances they would have replaced the vanguard to deal with this. But now it is impossible. When Selena was about to fight the monster alone, Edel suddenly appeared nearby and with a reassuring smile said that everything was fine. He was here, since it would be hard for her alone, so he would handle it himself. He stood firm while the bloody Minotaur, now enraged, let out a deafening roar. A strong sound wave hit him. His eyes widened in surprise for a moment. When Rin cried out in alarm, Edel simply muttered to himself and stretched one hand forward, as if preparing for a simple task. His hand did not block or parry, but calmly grabbed the monster's horn that was charging an attack, instantly stopping its colossal momentum. He glanced back at his stunned comrades, asked with barely concealed disappointment if that was all the beast was capable of, and Selena was so shocked she could not utter a word. Her shock instantly turned to panic. Recognizing the Minotaur's dull rumble, Selena shouted that it was bad. It was a harbinger of its terrifying battle cry. The monster roared right in Edel's face. Selena shouted that if he took this blast head-on, he would be paralyzed and at the mercy of the beast. Edel just thought to himself what a racket it was. From the side, Ren and Selena just stood, unable to believe their eyes. The roar had no effect on him at all. Edel did not even flinch. Even the Minotaur froze in silence. Its jaw dropped in surprise. Its most powerful ability had failed. Seizing the moment, Edel squeezed the horn, and with one hand easily lifted the colossal monster into the air. He delivers the final blow, his voice calm, and the huge monster finally falls. As the Minotaur's body disintegrates into particles of light, Alice and Rin stand in complete shock. And Alice whispered that this boss, who usually requires dozens of people, fell so easily that she is not even sure if this is reality at all. At the spot where the beast just disappeared, a huge treasure chest suddenly appears. The blonde student, forgetting about fear, anxiously wonders what is inside. The student suspects that the chest might be another monster in disguise, but Selena smiles and confidently waves it off, explaining that she has never heard of dungeon completion rewards being a trap. They found themselves trapped, but Alice remains cautious. This dungeon is noticeably different from those they knew, and she recalls an instance when opening the boss's chest triggered a trap. The floor collapsed, and this thought shocks the blonde apprentice. Despite their argument, Edel himself opens the chest and pulls out a small shining white cube. The blonde student immediately recognizes it and, stunned, exclaims this is a box with items, a jackpot, and definitely the most valuable item they have ever obtained. Selena agrees, smiling. The item box will be a real salvation in their future dungeon expeditions. Rin, however, looks with mixed feelings and quietly mutters her disagreement. Edel addressed the group, acknowledging that usually the rewards belong to the club, but this is an exception since the victory was entirely his. The box with items should belong to him. Rin conceded and agreed that his logic was sad. Sudden sound, he still hands them the box with things. Surprised by his generosity, Selena and Rin ask why he gives it away without any hesitation. He explained to his classmate that he could hide the item in his own subspace, but its capacity was not unlimited. The student, still processing this proposal, asked how large is this capacity. In response, Edel equally matter-of-factly reported that his subspace was so large that the entire royal capital could fit inside it. And the student froze speechless when Edel solemnly handed over that small cubicle. The blonde student was struggling for words, confused, while the guys intervened with a mocking smile. He said that if any student did not want it, he would gladly take it, adding that it was better for the club to have it than for Edel. Leave it, the matter is settled. The company stepped onto the glowing teleportation circle on the dungeon floor. Their way back to the academy is now secured. In a moment, they found themselves again at the academy, where Selena and other anxious club members greeted them. And Selena exclaimed with relief upon seeing that her club president, Edel, was safe. Safe? Selena explained that they were frightened when they lost contact with the president's team. She said their group had defeated the boss and escaped thanks to teleportation magic, and that they were just about to call for help, but she admitted that the story sounded incredible. The blonde student laughed and jokingly asked if she had fallen into a hypnosis trap, but the guys angrily interrupted him with shouts that it was not a fabrication. And then he declared that Edel had defeated the Minotaur boss alone, leaving Selena stunned and speechless. Selena thought to herself that their distrust was quite understandable. The story sounded too absurd. And while she pondered this statement, Rin quietly confirmed from the side that it was true. True, a picture flashed in her mind of Edel's stunning power against the Minotaur. Looking down at the box of items, she so wanted to believe that it was all just like a dream, but the solid weight of the box in her hands did not allow doubt. She realized that this thing was undeniable proof that the incredible events of their exploration really took place. She and the rest of the club members emerged from the dungeon uplifted and joyful, thanked Edel for the pleasant outing, and eagerly asked when their next exploration would take place. As they walked, Edel noticed a thoughtful expression on Selena's face. He asked if by any chance she was thinking of joining his club, explaining that although he was still choosing candidates, she was one of them, and her slight smile and averted gaze hinted that she was indeed considering it. His friendly expression suddenly disappeared. He raised his hand, stopped her, and sharply said that it would be better if she did not join honestly. The difference in their levels was just too great, and it would not be for her. For her own good, he stepped back, decisively adding that his club must refuse her, leaving her standing alone under the opensk. The guy? Soon at the academy, Geyser approached Edel with a confident smile, mockingly asked about the one who broke into the club, and declared that rumors had spread so widely that now it was impossible even to go on a tour to other clubs. It turned out that they had completely closed. He and Edel sank to their knees in despair, like those guys complaining that every door was shut to them. He said that although he did not know all the details, it was a big problem. So many members had completely lost spirit that their club could no longer function. Hearing this, Edel was completely confused. Could Geyser mean him specifically? For now, Edel decided to postpone his search for the club. Meanwhile, in the director's office, Alice demanded answers. She confronted the academy director to find out who that boy was. And her companion, probably her brother, listened as she insisted on being told everything from his lack of common sense to his incredible strength. And then asked if the great Sager Mares, her own master, knew what she was doing, and she knew him. The director looked out at the academy courtyard. His face became serious, and he confirmed her suspicion. It was Master Amires who had raised that boy into a demon world. His words struck Alice with incredible force. The essence became simple. If someone was trained from childhood in the demon world by the strongest person in the world, then such an abnormal level of strength becomes quite understandable. And this realization broke through Alice, who could only stammer from the truth. Settling down, she stood and listened as the teacher gave advice. The teacher admitted that although Edel was an amazing child, Alice also had something to learn from him and asked them to get along, and with her back to the woman, Alice quietly assured that she would do. Changing the subject, the teacher invited her for tea and said that delicious tea leaves had just been delivered. They sat together on a quiet bed. On the balcony, meanwhile, the director spoke directly to Edel. When Selena passed by, he asked Edel to look after his granddaughter and thought to himself that although he understood why Edel found it hard to get along with others, perhaps Selena could help him solve that problem. Shortly after that lesson began, the teacher addressed the students and said that, based on their previous practical magic lessons, they should now have a rough idea of their own magical F. She explained in detail that it was extremely important to determine their strongest trait among the 4 basic elements: water, earth, and wind. Even those who wanted to master other combat styles, she said, having any magical power greatly expands tactical possibilities, and this principle was visible from the side. Lesson, as if to prove her point, Selena stepped forward and released a dazzling flash of light. The sudden brightness blinded, and Edel exclaimed that he could not see. The other students recoiled together, frightened by the stunning flash. Magic? The teacher immediately noticed a chance for a lesson and explained that such a technique can be used to scare an opponent and open a window for attack, urging even beginner swordsmen and spearmen to train diligently. Edel looked at his own hand, pondering. Demonstration. The practical part of the lesson began with a line of students who summoned small magical shields to repel the continuous stream of fire. One of the barriers could not withstand the pressure and shattered with a sh. A sharp crack. Edel stared at the training target, remembered that it was made of a special metal resistant to magic, and wondered if he would be scolded for breaking it. Maybe better to hold back. While he was pondering this, a student nearby leaned over, trying to reach something. The student, trying to get his attention, admitted that he came from a famous family of swordsmen and did not like magic, then asked Edel for advice on how to learn to use it. Edel, surprised, could only ask if it was really. The thing was, he laughed self-mockingly and admitted that he was simply no good with magic. Edel listened silently with a thoughtful expression on his face. Suddenly, the student's expression cleared. He declared that if that was the case, there was a quick way to fix it. Edel became interested and asked if the student was S. He became serious and laid out his dangerous proposal. He would start casting spells, and Edel's task was to repel them with the same magic. He swore to keep attacking until she succeeded. Horrified, Edel objected that such a reckless method could kill him. Unmoved, the student explained that this was exactly how he had learned. He had been pushed to the brink of death more than once, and he firmly believed that true potential awakens only when placed in an extreme, life or death, deadly situation. Before he could explain anything else, a sharp scream cut through the air and startled him. He looked around and muttered to himself that he probably should have asked his brother for advice. It was a mistake. His gaze fell on Alice. He called her and asked if she was okay. Slightly annoyed, she briefly replied that she was fine. At that very moment, a burst of fire magic suddenly veered off its path. Its trajectory changed. In the air, Alice effortlessly diverted the stray spell, and when the flames dispersed harmlessly, she calmly remarked that there was nothing dangerous here. Her control. Absolutely. She turns to the two spectators, a confident smile playing on her lips. A young woman in a cloak fastened with a chain and a fair-haired student look at her, momentarily stunned by her performance. I wondered who it could be. Alice announces with a theatrical flourish, but it is none other than Alice. The girl with the chain cloak, Selena, instantly approaches her, contemptuously calls Alice a useless granddaughter, and mockingly says that she doesn't even know how to cast a spell properly forward. From afar, Edel watches the growing tension, quite embarrassed, while Alice only barely smiles as if she foresaw everything and is completely unmoved by these cutting words. In the academy corridor, the fair-haired student looks anxiously at the girl with intricate curls. Diana barked at him and, waving him off, shouted, "I just stumbled, you bumped into me, and because of that my spell failed." She sharply directs a piercing look at Alice, who responds with fury. With a sneer, Diana challenges her, says she will manage much better, and demands that Alice watch closely. A cunning smile appears on her face. She covers her mouth and mockingly says that what is really funny is not so much control, but the wild power of fireballs that someone like Ed L can create. With a shout, she creates her own fireball. The blazing projectile rushes toward the group, but Tina instantly rushes into its path, intercepts it, and with the flat of her massive weapon skillfully deflects the fireball. It extinguishes on the ground, causing no harm. In response to the deflection, a slight self-confident smile appears on Diana's lips, and Alice freezes, eyes wide open in disbelief. Alice, completely confused, asks what that was at all, muttering that Diana can't even properly perform such a simple spell. Her flair only provokes loud mocking laughter from Diana. Her laughter suddenly dies out, her face hardens with contempt. She leans toward Alice and venomously asks what people will think of such an inept granddaughter when the grandmother was considered a heroine. Clenching her fists, Alice replies that her grandmother has nothing to do with their dispute. Diana pays no attention to this, raises a finger, on which a spark of magic flashes, and says she will now show real magic. She sharply points her finger forward and shouts, "This is how you use it." Her spell explodes. A powerful wave hits the training dummy. The scene shifts to 5 years ago at the Academy's training ground. Younger Alice, upset and humiliated, asked Diana how she even got here. And Diana, with a confident smile, explained that great hopes were placed on her because of her hidden magical gift, unlike Alice. In another memory, Edel encourages Alice. He sincerely believes in her and is sure she will soon master magic, but Alice doubts and asks if he really believes it. After all, she couldn't even repeat a simple trick of her grandmother Maribel. Thoughts involuntarily drift to Alice. He knows she is on the training field. He sits at the table with a worried expression. Suddenly, a commotion arose. Edel rushed forward, calling Alice anxiously, and found her on the ground among the aftermath resembling a magical explosion. She was screaming in pain. A voice recounts the event, saying she was injured during a magical frenzy. Ominous instruments flashed on a tray, and Edel froze in horror. Later, when Alice lies in bed, Edel stands nearby and gently tells her not to blame herself too much for what happened, reminding her that she is just a child. Alice raises her eyes and looks at him, her face full of fear. The memory of that day still lives in her head. She feels that horror, sees the image of a strange, solitary figure that imprinted in her memory, and it was after this that she entered the academy. Because of that trauma, she is still afraid to use magic. As soon as this thought flashed in her mind, a voice full of contempt sounded and disdainfully said, "What a pathetic thing it is, Maribel's own granddaughter can't do magic." It is Diana who smiles scornfully. She says she will forgive Alice for today's failure and, waving it off, turns and leaves. Alice remains standing alone, humiliated. Alice stands alone, head bowed, feeling defeated and quietly thinking that magic is no longer something she can possess. Her gloomy thoughts are interrupted by Edel, who quietly approached. He sincerely wonders why she consciously limits her power, and Alice raises her eyes, surprised by his straightforwardness. Before she could answer, Diana intervened with joyful laughter and pushed Alice to show everyone how she would learn to use magic again. And embarrassed Alice sharply replied that it was none of his business, and that she was only pretending not to know how. He just smiles, completely unmoved by her outburst. He tells Diana that he will release magic for Alice. It's the same essence, and winking, he adds that it's their little secret, and Diana was momentarily left speechless. Alice, his confidence barely affects Sue Dallas. Her hand clenches into a tight fist, and despair overwhelms her soul because she is sure he will not understand. She believes that it is precisely because of this power that she is considered an outcast and cannot find friends, but at the same time fears that her magic might get out of control and cause harm. She can no longer endure that internal struggle, turns to Edel with an irritated face, and shouts that she no longer knows what to do. Still, he remains completely calm. Placing his hand on his heart, he gently assures that he will take care of everything, so she only needs to try her magic once without any worries. Anxiously, she responds sharply, questioning his bold claim but looking at him intently, another thought flashes through her mind. Given his incredible power, maybe he really can handle the consequences. Outside, after a tense moment of hesitation, her face hardened with determination, she places her hand on her chest and agrees. All right, she declares, I will do it. Do it. As she dares to try, Diana, Tina, and another student stand nearby watching, and the boy smiles crookedly and says, oh, she accepts the challenge. Again, Edel patiently stood by the brick arch, giving Alice space to prepare. He silently watched as her eyes lowered. She froze, recalling old defeats and those words that she was supposedly bad at magic, but despite the internal struggle, Edel gave a gentle, reassuring smile. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand, and a faint shimmer of magical energy quietly began to gather in her palm. Nearby, Diana and another student froze, not believing that she was really trying to cast a spell. The power in her hand pulsed chaotically. She let out a tense groan as the energy began to slip out of her control. Edel's smile vanished, his face instantly became stern, as he noticed unstable magical energy gathering around. Everything around her spun, her eyes widened with panic. With horror slowly taking over her, she realized it was really happening again. She was losing control. In an instant, a colossal pillar of dark, fiercely blazing flame burst from beneath her feet. The impact threw her backward, and frightened Diana could only scream in sudden terror, calling for someone to do something. Something. In the middle of hell, she desperately tried to tame the fierce power, begged it to obey. The merciless heat surged over the other students, and Tina and her classmates screamed an alarm signal, but the flame did not obey it, uncontrollably spreading across the parade ground with fierce R. Rev Galas attracted the attention of their teacher. She ran over and saw the chaos. Recognizing the source, she shouted, Alisa, and immediately ordered the other students to step back. At that very moment, when the teacher's warning echo faded, the wild magic merged into a monstrous creature of pure flame, unleashing a silent, fierce roar. Below, Alice could only freeze in deep horror, and a barely audible scream escaped her lips. The fiery creature lashes the training ground with a huge tentacle. Alice screams at Edel in panic to be quiet, insisting she is doing everything she can and will eventually gain control if she just doesn't give up, and Edel calmly notes that she is not controlling it at all. As always, he continues, assuring her that everything will be fine and that he will never allow anyone to get hurt. Frozen by his unwavering confidence, Alice softened her expression and said she would believe in his cause. Words having won her trust, Edel instantly rushes forward straight into the blazing hell, while Alisa watches, still surrounded by fierce flames. On the side, other students recoil in shock, and the teacher stares, instantly recognizing the incredible power of this magic. She realizes with surprise that this is a level of strength that could even rival a Mara master. Another student, Diana, looks with a contemptuous gaze and aloud asks what kind of fire this is and how someone she considered worthless can have it. When Alice lets out a frightened squeak, Diana involuntarily wonders what such power would lead to if it could be caught. Calmly, while Diana mockingly sneers, Edel makes his move, silly flipping over the fiery beast's head and landing near Alice. Diana shouts after him in confusion, demanding to know who he is. He is here, landing next to Alice, but she is lost in her struggle. She reaches out a desperate hand, and despair is written on her face because she does not know what to do to finally tame the flame. Her will falters, her strength begins to fail. Alice feels her magical energy rapidly fading. Noticing her struggle, Edel smiles warmly and says that if she just continues, she will eventually learn to control it. But Alice worries that her power is almost gone. Suddenly he places his hand on her shoulder and stops her. Confused, Alice asks why he is making her stop. He simply explains that it is because her magic is almost gone. Unnoticed by her, his own legs tremble. Tension, he calmly tells Alice that he has just replenished her magical energy. She looks, unbelieving, feeling that her power is fully restored. She can only shyly whisper, "What?" In response, he explains that he has a huge reserve of magic, dozens of times more than usual, and says that her training is far from over, and this news simply stunned Alice. Stunned, with a light wave of his hand, he suggested starting a special training regimen morning, noon, and night. He noticed that their lessons seemed to be over. The bell rings in. Background, his indifference breaks when Diana approaches him closely. Her face just a few centimeters from his, she angrily accuses him of being completely reckless and absurd. She continues to scold him, her voice sharp with outrage, saying that his previous promise to make Alice so accustomed to magical fatigue that she would no longer feel it is completely in dispute. Acceptable. While Diana boils with anger, Alice shyly steps forward, trying to get his attention. She begins to speak but hesitates, searching for the right words. Her face reddens, she struggles to express her feelings. Her voice is barely a whisper as she tries to explain. She herself overwhelmed with emotion, tears of relief roll down her face. Wiping them with her fist, she barely manages to utter a sincere F. You. Her gratitude breaks through his thoughts. He turns to her with a gentle smile and soothingly tells her this. Thanks to her, he feels a little more With a clear head, his gentle words resonate within her. She looks down, pondering the enormous weight of worries she carried just a moment ago. Diana, angry about Edel's earlier proposal, approaches him and yells directly that he has no tact at all and why he made Alice cry. While Edel, stunned, can only guess what she means, realizing that perhaps he and Diana will never be. They walk away, the quarrel continues, and director Marable watches them go and thinks that they will probably keep arguing after school, but suddenly, her attention is distracted by the assistant. She was called. The assistant reports that the third Prince Senior has arrived and is waiting in the reception. Marable heard this and her face froze as she feels the visit will bring trouble, mutters that he has returned again, and orders the assistant to take him to the Ray. In the reception room, she enters and before her stands a guest senior, the third prince of the kingdom of Rada. With a light, casual smile he asks if she is all right. Marable, crossing her arms, briefly replies that she is. He continues, saying that although it is painful for her, he would rather she live long. Marable's gaze narrow-edged understands that his polite words are only a prelude to his true intentions. Through his intentions he reveals the true goal. He wants her to resign so he can lead the school, but Marable remains steadfast and says that no matter how much he asks, her answer will never change. Do not change. Equality now prevails at school. As two students say, she treats both noble and common alike, a policy that arose because the director herself, Marable, comes from C. Homeland of commoners. The Seigneur rejects this ethics, stating that he has no intention to change its policy and that he will not do not be deceived by them. Marable challenges his supposed indifference, reminding that when he was a student, he seemed a good young man, friendly to everyone, but in reality only communicated with his noble friends and carefully avoided. He avoided commoners, she thought to herself. For a nobleman with strong, elitist ideas, a school that treats everyone equally and has produced so many excellent graduates must seem uninteresting, and she questioned his true motives first of all. Intercept? He listened with a tired expression while Prince Senior pretended to be upset, complaining that his former teacher no longer believed in him. The prince's voice was filled with false sorrow, a clear attempt to manipulate, which did not move the old man. When the door clicked and closed, the director's face turned to stone. He was really almost 80, but he was not thinking about retirement. His determination was unwavering. Elsewhere, Alice was gathering courage and admitted to herself that she really did not want to resort to such measures, but now she felt she had no choice. When she tried the plan in her mind, the cold consent of Prince Senior only reinforced this feeling. It seemed the insidious conspiracy had already begun to act. In the Heroes Academy room, Alice flopped onto the bed, completely exhausted, and let out a long sigh. She loudly complains to Edel, who stands nearby, saying she doesn't even have time to rest. He forces her to train every morning and even before bed, not giving her a minute of respite. Although she is tired, she stares at her hand. Doubt crosses her face. Do all these trainings really make her better at controlling magic? Later, under the clear sky, the teacher's voice suddenly sounded. A practical lesson on adventure research is starting. The students, among whom were Edel and Alice, gathered in a forest clearing, and their teacher explained that besides the usual lessons, now from time to time they would go out for practical combat exercises right in the field. She continued and informed them that this exercise would be conducted jointly with another class. At that moment, another instructor appeared, a stern-looking man named Heisen, and announced the task. This area is teeming with monsters, so it is perfect for training. The students must form groups of 3, hunt monsters and collect points, then consult within their teams. When he finished, Alice leaned toward Tina and whispered her impression. She admitted that teacher Heisen was nice but too strict, and she already didn't like him. Then she turned to Edel with a bright smile and said that today she was counting on him, while the students dispersed into the forest for the task. Edel heard Tina's joyful exclamation. She exclaimed how lucky she was to be on a team with him and was sure the task would now go smoothly, and Edel gently smiled and said he was looking forward to working with her. But her cheerful voice caused their third comrade to emit a sharp, irritated sound. The student turned to Edel and coldly remarked to him, "Do not speak so familiarly." The student stood aside, arms crossed. Alice quietly whispered to Edel that this is Gria, the eldest son of the Viscount, and his arrogant manner is quite typical for the nobility. Observing from afar, Dionysius noted to Selena that probably other teams face the same problems because of their aristocrats. At the other end, the same is heard. Geyser loudly complains that he was placed in a team with a commoner, and Edel, hearing this, asks teacher Heisen for help, but he coldly says that without a valid reason he cannot interfere in team relations. The guys just smile, and he mentally tells himself that he will have to endure this unpleasant atmosphere just a little longer. The thought is suddenly interrupted by a dull, hoarse roar. A small monster with a stick jumps out of the bushes. Instantly, Tina rushed past Edel with a sword in hand and triumphantly exclaimed that she scored 1 point for their team, but Edel's face suddenly tensed. He shouted a warning. Trans. Tina froze, her victorious smile faded, when behind her thundered the deafening roar of a giant tree monster. With growing horror, she realized that its camouflage was perfect. She did not feel its presence at all. In the heat of the ambush, Edel momentarily distracted by his other partner Grai, who stands aside with crossed arms and does nothing to help, and on his face is a quiet confusion because of this inaction. Meanwhile, Tina is breathing heavily. Sword at the ready she stands facing the huge camouflage treant that caught her by surprise. When the immediate threat receded, grateful Tina asks Ed Elfer for help, says it would be great practice, and he calmly explains that he recognized the treant by its magical signature and admits that this is not an ordinary skill. Alice exploded with irritation. She says that Grai does not cooperate at all. When she moves away from him, Grai cuts off, saying he heard that teacher Heisen is the same, hinting that he also looks down on Comet Earth. Edel listens, thoughtfully quieting down. While Alice explains in detail, she confirms that teacher Chaldir does not differentiate between students, but there are rumors about teacher Heisen that he is very strict with ordinary students. His eyes open wide as a sudden alarming, frightening realization flashes in his mind. The image of teacher Heisen with a self-satisfied smile flickers before his eyes. Returning to reality, Alice asks if the monster is approaching, but Edel feels otherwise and says that about 10 silhouettes are heading towards them. Path, he quickly explains, these are not monsters, but people hiding among the trees, a spotted group in hoods and masks. Alice is stunned. How could he know this from afar? Already running, Edel explains that his reconnaissance ability is so strong that he senses presences up to 100 kilometers away. Path, just at the moment he finished explaining, a mysterious group in hoods emerges from the forest and blocks the student's path. Path, the figures in hoods assess their targets. Although these are just children from the Hero Academy, underestimating them is dangerous. Alice stood firm and wondered who they were, and the lead attacker assured that they do not intend to kill her, but if she decides to resist, there are no guarantees. She tells them to stop, sure they cannot escape, but Green Objects calmly says the attackers are right and there is no escape, so he suggests Alice just let herself be captured. Edel feels that the opponents are experienced and numerous, and understands even he cannot handle them. Alice angrily asks behind his back if he is hinting that they should surrender, and from afar one of the hooded people calmly says they are only here to capture a few of us. Not all. Grai with a sinister smile lunged at Alice, clutching a small cylindrical object in his hand, and stunned by his sudden movement and the hint in that figure's words, she asked, "What do you mean?" He hits her hard on the temple. The blow knocks her off balance. Balance? Alice staggered from the unexpected blow and at that very moment realized it was a trap. Seeing a gap in the defense, two hooded figures rushed forward, their curved blades. Ready, they instantly close the distance. Their blades descend on the stunned Alice, who can only gasp in alarm. Almost at the last moment, just before the strike, a hexagonal barrier materializes and deflects the attack. The attacker recoils in shock, asking when this barrier appeared. Nearby, Edel calmly confirms that everything is exactly as it seems. Games, his intervention ended. Edel's gaze slid across the clearing to the place where Grease stands alone sorting. In hand, instantly he appears right behind the trader's back. With a single simple word, Edel sharply strikes Gris on the nape, instantly incapacitating him, and he, gasping sh. Shock, he stands over the fallen Gris and doubts his motives. Edel notices that for someone who seemed indifferent to the search, Gris suspiciously wanted to lead the group. She concludes it was a bait to drive them into this ambush. And behind him, Tina shockingly realizes the truth of his accusation. Hooded figures watching from inside the barrier grew worried. One cursed that everything had become even more complicated, and another insistently demanded to know what Edel meant by accusing Gris of being their comp. Unmoved, one of the attackers mockingly waved off the barrier, calling it a hastily erected barricade. With a sharp order to destroy it, they pull out a sinister-looking dagger. The blade strikes the magical barrier with a sharp crack, but the hexagonal pattern holds firm. The attacker recoils in disbelief, not believing how this is possible, while Edel calmly watches their shock at the incredible power of the barrier. Power? Disappointed by their failure, another hooded figure steps forward and orders his comrades to retreat, dark energy gathering in his outstretched palm, and he begins to utter the spell of a powerful enchantment. Explosion, the spell reaches its climax with a harsh, concussive blast that tears F. In the forest, as smoke and dust settle, one of the attackers chuckles, confident that such power will be more than enough, while his comrade looks on in complete disbelief, wondering if their leader intends to attack their own allies inside. Barrier, their shock is completely justified. Tina froze, stunned that the barrier did not even flinch from the direct hit. She can hardly believe that this is the same hastily built barrier she witnessed just moments ago. While their gazes were fixed on the impregnable barrier, the hooded figures flinched at the voice behind them. They sharply turned and saw Edel standing there, somehow having emerged from the barrier. One of them gasped, "When did you appear?" Edel calmly said that it is foolish to think he cannot leave his own barrier, and gave the order. Finish them off. From the protected flickering barrier, Alice watches the clash, her face a mask of shock and concern. After the order, the forest floor is strewn with fallen bodies of hooded assailants. Edel stands calmly amid the devastation, and one of the survivors whispers in awe and disbelief at the stunning power that struck. Knocked them down. His friends Tina and Alice rush to him. Tina exhaled with relief he is safe. Nearby, a fallen attacker curses and admits that they were never warned they would have to fight a child with such power. Abilities? Then Grieve approaches, pressing his hand to his side with an offended, annoyed expression. He disdainfully snorts at the commoner, then tells Edel that he will more quickly learn the details from the other side. His words are cut off. Alice grabs him by the shoulder, her face twisted with rage. She says she is taking him for a moment and angrily asks if he really understands the full seriousness of his F. Realizing his situation, she shoves him forcefully to the ground right in front of Edel, and gasping with anger, Alice asks what he intends to do with. Traitor, Grid trembles on the ground, stammering that he probably won't be released by words alone. Edel looks down with a calm smile, confirming that he would indeed like to take a closer look. His eerie calm makes Alice realize that dealing with him alone is no easy matter. Then Edel indifferently advises Gry he better not watch what will happen. Further, Gry panics. He shouts for them to stop and threatens revenge from his family. Edel, unmoved, muses aloud whether it would be better, after extracting information from him, simply to make sure Gry can never speak again. This thought throws Gry into a fit of pure horror. Events unfold, a drop of sweat runs down Alice's face, and she gathers her resolve, believing that with her current level of power she can handle any co. Next, suddenly a new group in hoods emerges from the shadows of the forest. Nearby looms a terrifying shadowy paw with claws, and one of the newcomers throws a demanding look at the students. Who are you? The giant claw of the shadow creature descends on the students. Tina screams in horror that they are doomed, but Alice sharply pushes her hand forward and loudly shouts a spell for free. Spell? As she releases the magic, Tina anxiously calls her by name. Alice's face is a complete mask of concentration, her hair wildly flies amid the swirling energy whirls. From afar, Edel faints from the uncontrollable magical power raging on the spot. He grits his teeth and warns them to retreat because Alice's control is still dangerously active. Unstable, suddenly another voice cuts through the chaos. Diana appears, brushing off any complaints. She summons her magic with a shout of ice shield. A colossal wall of jagged ice bursts forth. Powerful ice magic erupts from the ground, instantly shattering the claw of the shadow beast, and one of the hooded killers is caught in the explosion. He lets out a final scream. His body instantly freezes and crumbles to pieces. Tina, breathless with excitement, exclaims how incredible that performance was and asks Alice what she just did. Alice, a bit exhausted and confused, replies that she somehow managed to defeat them. Her persistent questions made Alice explain somewhat uncertainly that she had survived some Spartan training. Meanwhile, Diana looked back with disdain, noting that what she had seen could barely be called magic, then aloud pondered who their attackers were. Tina's expression changes. She glances at Diana, a flicker of realization in her eyes. It seems she understands that the overwhelming power does not come from Alice. Nearby, hidden from the student's view, teacher Heisen adjusts his monocle, flanked by two hooded figures, and he coldly, with some fondness, says that it's a pity to be destroyed by children, but concludes that for such a price the bandits' performance. That was enough. He and his hooded subordinates looked down arrogantly at the students. From below came a confused voice doubting the teacher's presence and asking for explanation. In response, Heisen spoke to Alice directly through the connection. With a cold look, he asked if she would be so kind as to surrender without fuss. Her confusion turned into grim determination. Clenching her fist, Alice contemplated the betrayal. Now everything became clear. She thought he was on the side of their attackers. In the secluded courtyard, teacher Heisen stands before Diana, his figure casting a long shadow, the air thick with unspoken tension, and Diana stands opposite, frozen and tense. She breaks the silence, her voice sharp, full of reproach. "What is your goal?" she demands. "Do you understand your role as a teacher?" Heisen laughs, brushing off her concerns. He says he does not need his current position, and adds with relief that he will no longer have to bother with educating commoners. Her hand suddenly grabbed his hand. Diana grimly declared that the foolish policy of the director equating commoners and nobles must be stopped immediately. For this, she seems to hint that she supports him. The scene sharply changes. Heisen's true loyalty is revealed. He whispers to Prince Senior that their plan is possible only under one condition: the destruction of the main heroine Marable. Returning to the courtyard, Diana noticed a figure lying motionless on the ground. It was Marable, and horror slowly appeared on her face. Heisen remains unshaken. He confirms that Shaltier was with Marable and reveals an even more sinister part of his plan. Diana's grandson is vital, and he intends to use the students as hostages to lure his target. He coldly continued explaining while two hooded figures stood over the unconscious Marable. She was an obstacle, he said, explaining that since Marable, a noblewoman herself, did not share their ideology, she had to be rendered unconscious, and Diana froze at the revelation. Behind her, something was catching up. Alice asks what they should do, and Diana decisively orders to stay behind, and suddenly a grim doubt crept in. If she is caught, it's the end for grandmother, so there is no other way. She decides to fight. "I must do this," she thought, and her face hardened. Suddenly, a huge wave of energy burst forth, and before them appeared a giant roaring monster of fire and slime. He gasped and looked in disbelief. What is this magical power? He whispered in shock this was not in the intelligence reports. The fiery slimy monster lunges forward with a terrible maw, and Diana does not retreat. She extends her hand and challenges it. Withstand my next attack. She unleashes a barrage of energetic explosions. Diana believes, no matter how strong a creature is, if it can be dodged, it is not a threat. Since it does not move, she asks how we will handle this attack. The attack absorbs slime, and Prince Sinir looks shocked at the appearance of the second monster. The power of the magical strike sent shockwaves through the area. Prince Sinir clicked his tongue in irritation and jumped back, dodging the scattered energy, landing gracefully while Hyzen watched him from afar. He notices that Diana is clearly struggling to control her attacks simultaneously. Deciding that this is his chance, he announces that it is time for his trump card and clenches his fist with determination. While he prepares his move, the burning slime raises a fierce whirl of fire that completely envelops the place where the prince stood. Seeing the prince seemingly caught in the explosion, Diana briefly wondered if she had hit him, but the fiery slime roared back to life, its body reformed, and she snorted disdainfully. Do they really think an attack of this level can defeat her? Suddenly, a dark figure emerges from beneath the ground behind Diana and Alice. Prince Sinir surfaces from the Shadow Lake. Both girls froze in shock, and he realizes with horror that Sinir has just used shadow teleportation magic. From afar, the heights seem to narrow. He recognizes the magic the elder was forced to use and involuntarily thinks that this is what one should expect from the hero's grandson, and the prince now stands beside the unconscious Marable. He turns to Alice and confidently says he can still fight, but Alice, worried, looks at Diana and asks if she is on the edge, while in Edel's mind flashes a thought about Diana's usual, even tougher training. She looks fiercely, clutching a small glowing object in her hand. With renewed determination, she says that in such a place she cannot be defeated. In the darkness of the forest, a sudden lightning-fast attack cut through the air. The target is Alice. Her eyes widen in genuine shock as she realizes the danger only a moment too late. The force of the invisible strike throws her back. A cry of surprise escapes her lips, and she loses balance, collapsing to the ground. She collapsed among the trees, groaning in pain, and everything blurred before her eyes. In a moment, Alice found herself tied up on the power floor, Diana looming over her with a cruel smile. And Alice realized with horror that Diana was part of the conspiracy, mockingly stating that Alice probably did not expect an attack from behind. Teacher Hyzen appeared next to Diana with a self-satisfied smile, asking if she really thought he did not foresee this, and explained that he deliberately placed students from noble families loyal to him in every team. From the ground, Alice looks up and mutters that this is not the end yet. And Diana, delighting in the captive, says with pleasure how nice it is to think that she will never have to see Alice's face again. Hyzen turns away contemptuously, calls Alice stubborn, and coldly tells her, just surrender and quietly go to sleep. As he speaks, suddenly someone's hand tightly grips his hand and he immediately freezes. Cold, dizziness, and whirlwinds around, he shuddered, sweating all over, demanding to know who was here. Before him stood Marable with a grim expression. You are late, she said, her voice. She stood unrelentingly. Their confrontation with Teacher Hyzen was suddenly interrupted by a voice shouting a name. Edel, who was being talked about, appeared nearby, his expression plaus. Hyzen sharply turned his head in shock. He recognized the very student who was rumored about, and now he was holding the weakened Alice. The teacher froze, stunned, not understanding how and when he appeared here. Edel lowered his gaze to Alice and gently said that she did well, adding that her resilience was the result of someone's training. Then he glanced sideways at the stunt teacher and calmly said, You are the only one left. These words sent a chill through Hyzen, his eye behind the monitor wide open in disbelief. Michael, hearing Edel, Hyzen scanned the clearing. He saw his agents in hoods and even Diana, scattered on the ground and fallen, and among the bodies stood the lonely student Gry, completely confused. Edel addressed stunned Gry, explaining that he had dealt with all of them while the others were distracted, and then indifferently asked where that noble student from Greece was now. Team, when Edel spoke, he gestured toward the swirling vortex of darkness. Gry, trembling, looked at the portal and asked if Edel meant him. The frame instantly depicted the fate of that geyser student. He fell to his knees, screamed in utter terror, and begged for the torment to stop, while Grick just stood in horror and called out to his comrades. Name of the comrade. Returning to the present, Greed began to demand to know what Edel had done. Hyzen, now pale and sweaty, looked at Edel as the terrible realization began to dawn on him. The teacher realized with horror that Edel had completely broken Geyser's spirit, and Edel, chillingly indifferent, replied, I just taught him a little lesson. A little. He pays attention to the trembling Gry and calmly assures him that everything is fine. Hyzen looks distrustfully, clutching his chest and quietly reminding himself that they still have other hostages hidden somewhere. Edel throws him a chilling smile and says that people like him are better broken first and then healed because that way they become perfectly obedient. Result, his smile disappears, replaced by a cold, emotionless expression. He announces that he has already taken everyone under control, leaving no room for to leave no doubt. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Diana stands over fallen people in hoods. It turns out they were all tracked down and subdued thanks to information extracted from Grai. Diana says that Tina is now treating other students, and silently warns about any further CA tricks. The full weight of the situation falls on Heisen. His monocle seems to darken as he realizes the complete collapse of his plan and whispers only one word. Disbelief at failure turns into rage. His eyes roll toward Edel. He shouts that this must be a trick to confuse him, and the unshaken Edel simply repeats that the plan is already over in failure. Heisen stands stunned, and Edel's gaze softens as he looks at Alice. He muses aloud that he never understood what friends were before coming to the human world, but seeing wounded Alice is unpleasant to him. Everything was fine with him. Angry at the calmness of the boys, Heisen rushed forward, roaring for him to stop fooling around. Edel met his onslaught with a cold look, asked what would happen if he just quietly surrendered, and then warned that he was not immersive. Mood, Heisen swings and suddenly stops. Suspicion overcoming his anger, seeing Edel standing so peacefully, he decides it's a trap and swears that he will not for this, but as he hesitates, a dark, ominous energy begins to crackle and thicken around Edel's outstride. Reaching out, he stands over the fallen opponent, dark energy twisting around his legs like a living shadow. He declares that it is over, but Heisen does not give up. Jumping up, he lunges forward with his sword, shouting not to joke with him and calls Edel a fake. The sudden attack grabs Edel. Surprised, the blade whistled to his throat, but Hugh's unimaginable speed catches the flat side of the sword between his fingers and instantly stops it. Screams and glances and disbelief, he firmly holds the captured weapon. His gaze is unwavering and calm. The sight of such self-control sends a shiver through Heisen, who realizes with growing horror that Edel did not even flinch. Edel's grip on the blades, Titan's steel of the sword in his hand, shatters into fragments with a sharp crack. Stepping back, he examines his hand and with mild curiosity notices a small cut. Heisen can only watch, his mind spinning from what he has seen. Filled with power, his eyes and features suddenly contort into a triumphant, mad laughter. He admits that the sword was coated with poisona potent toxin, and even a small amount can kill a wyvern. It penetrates the body. Hidden in the shadow of nearby trees, Diana watches the scene with grim confidence and concludes, no matter how strong Edel was, his recklessness grabbing the blade with a bare hand became a fatal mistake, and that he will die soon. Meanwhile, in the clearing, Edel is simply looking at the smug Heisen, his face showing an expression of pure surprise. Nothing was visible on his face, only a slight tingling from the cut, which he mentioned with eerie calm, and it was precisely the lack of reaction that threw Heisen into a panic, demanding to know why nothing was happening, insisting that the poison should have already taken effect. Immediately, unaffected, he asked if the attack was already over. When Heisen began to sweat, Alice appeared with her manticore and directly confirmed his fears. The poison would not work. Work on Edel? Her words confused Alice, but Heisen suddenly changed. The fear faded, replaced by a manic joy. He laughed hysterically and exclaimed that such a turn could even prove to be a better opportunity for him. As he rejoiced in his new plan, two huge glowing eyes lit up in the shadows. Nearby, the eyes belonged to a colossal figure in armor, with metal plates humming with incredible energy as it came to life. It was a mechanical monster of enormous size, a dragon-like combat machine made of dark metal, radiating a glow. A powerful force loomed. Glancing up at the mechanical titan, Edel could only ask what it was. On the height, Heisen stood with his hand raised, making it clear who was in command here. That creature? He laughed from inside the cabin, mocking them with his surprise, and proudly declared that it was a dragon machine, an ancient superweapon resurrected from the ruins, and the ultimate means to kill the heart. Hero Marable, while Edel and Alice stood under that giant machine almost like tiny figures, heard Heisen's voice thunder and announced that his weapons lacked combat data, so Edel would become the perfect final test subject. Edel's eyes opened wide in disbelief. He looked at the massive armored head of the dragon machine and aloud asked if someone was controlling it from inside. A voice confirmed his suspicion. Teacher Heisen appeared, his face twisted into a smug smile, boldly saying that such weapons do not exist these days, boasting that his mind had enhanced it and made it the strongest dragon, and added that Edel should consider it an honor to lose to it. Watching from afar, Diana froze speechless at the incredible force bursting from the machine. As she watched, Heisen's voice thundered fiercely ordered the opponent to die with honor. The head of the dragon machine lunged forward in a devastating strike. The mechanical colos loomed over Edel. Its voice thundered the order to move forward, but Edel stood motionless, a small stubborn figure against the stunning power of the ancient weapon. The attack strikes the ground and completely misses. Heisen shouts in disbelief, not understanding how Edel could dodge. And when the dragon prepares another attack, Edel calmly thinks that dragons from the demon world were a bit stronger, but suddenly realizes the real challenge. His strikes will not work at all against the incredibly strong armor of the machine. The machine does not tire of mocking, insisting that it is not destined to win. From the command post in Hyzen, confidence wavered, and below, a worried Alice asks herself whether what the machine says is true. In the sudden whirl of movement, Edel makes a leap and instantly lands on the massive leg of the dragon, skillfully landing and briefly orienting himself on the huge metal surface. Without wasting time, he easily delivers a quick punch right to the armor joint on the leg of the machine. The impact severed the connection. In the cabin, Hyzen's face turned into a mask of shock, his monocle nearly fell out of his eye, and he stared at the damaged report, not believing his eyes. He leans back, stunned by the force of the blow that pierced the cabin. Standing at a distance, he cannot believe it. Edel sees that the vehicle's armor is indeed strong, but his attack clearly worked. He unleashes a powerful counterattack, swinging the massive tail of the dragon machine, and shouts that this is the very technique that once toppled an entire castle. The blade tail slices through the air, but Edel managed to raise his hands and deflect the destructive blow. He froze completely stunned. He parried the strike. Hyzen, enraged, sharply declares that if his usual attacks do not work, he will unleash his trump card. Meanwhile, Edel is stunned to marvel that this huge machine can move so fast. At his command, a large compartment on the dragon machine opened, and inside appeared a long-range missile launcher. With a deafening roar, the rocket tears into the sky and swiftly flies straight at Edel, who is intently watching its approach. He instantly turns and runs away, but the rocket bends in the air and relentlessly pursues him across the entire landscape. From his cockpit, Hyzen laughs maniacally, boasting that the rocket has auto-tracking a weapon that once destroyed an entire nation. He complains about its incredible cost but still justifies its use. While Edel runs, suddenly Alice appears nearby and asks if the projectile is chasing them, and he confirms that it relentlessly follows their every move. He slows his pace for a fraction of a second, thoughts racing in his head. He hesitates, thinking about what to do, considering whether to apply a specific, unspoken strategy. The rocket mercilessly chases through the impassable terrain, and beside him, Alice, anxious, asks how much longer they can still escape from it. She peers into the targeting display, a drop of sweat slowly trickling down her temple. On another screen, Hyzen's face emerges with a cocky smile. He urges them to surrender and accept his faith. Her face hardened with determination. She realizes that Hyzen is about to change the rocket's trajectory at the last moment to hit them. Hyzen's face filled with anxiety when she declared that she would not fall for his trick, realizing that she is now leading her creature straight to his position. As they close in, Edel glanced back at the colossal dragon machine and loudly approves. He is impressed by her tactical maneuver. He raises his eyes to the open sky, a wild smile spreading across his face, and he shouts excitedly that they are flying. The rocket, however, does not stop. It relentlessly chases and now targets the dragon machine itself. From its cabin come cries and desperate pleas for the projectile to stay away. The path, on the back of the fleeing creature, Edel clenched his teeth and tensed, preparing for the inevitable strike and explosion. Clenching his teeth with determination, he utters one powerful command, Heavenly Steve. At that very moment, the targeting marker on Hyzen's display blinked and disappeared. The lock was broken. Edel suddenly finds himself on the massive armored wing of the dragon machine. He looks around, completely confused and doesn't know where he is. The missile, whose course can no longer be changed, whistles through the air straight at the dragon machine. And Hyzen watches in complete horror as his plan catastrophically fails. His eyes widen even more when he notices Edel standing on the wing of the machine, and realizes with horror that the boy somehow teleported just before the strike. He only watched as the missile hit the target and engulfed the dragon machine in a catastrophic explosion. The shockwave threw Alice and her creature into the air, pushing them away from the fire. A black column of smoke rose high above the forest canopy, a grim monument to the machine's destruction. The ruins lay on the ground. He trembled in disbelief. He could not comprehend what had just happened and who this boy was who appeared. He cursed at himself when he realized that the dragon machine, the weapon intended for the heroine Maribel, was now lost. He saw no other way out. Twilight was approaching and he decided to retreat for now, planning to hide in his shadows and his S. He wanted to escape, but as he was planning his flight, a voice sounded right behind him. It was Edel, who calmly said that running was pointless, and asked what punishment awaited Hyzen after the report of such a catastrophic failure. Hyzen's face twisted in pure horror at the sudden appearance of the boy, and Edel just looked back, his expression unreally. Like unreadable panic displaced all logic, he turned and ran, releasing a frightened. He did not manage to get far when a hand firmly grabbed him by the shoulder and stopped him right in his truck. A sharp jab pierced his neck on the rails, and he howled in pain while Edel firmly held his F. Quickly approaching, Edel leaned in close and calmly asked if he wanted to try the same poison he had applied to his own body. On the ground, clutching the dry, cracked clay, Hyzen could only look up in horror. Teacher Hyzen let out a bone-chilling scream as the poison ran through his body, and a dark liquid burst from his back. He couldn't believe his eyes as Edel calmly explained the situation. Hyzen asked how it was possible, and Edel said he could simply use antidote magic and revive him again and again. And again, he pressed the blade to the man's throat, ordering him to wait. Meanwhile, at the academy, Tina asked Alice if the newcomer really defeated the dragon machine himself. Alice recounted the official version from the teacher that it was an old weapon that simply malfunctioned and self-destructed, and she agreed. It's hard to believe that an ordinary person could fight F. It's hard to believe. She admitted that if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed it. Also, the scene changes. Tied up and broken, Hyzen mumbles apologies. Alice's voice explains that Hyzen seems to have become a completely different person and that the students who helped him, like Diana, were. She was expelled, but she immediately clarifies not everyone was involved. In a brief shot, Diana looks completely indifferent. Consequences. Walking through the hall, Alice thinks it would be wise to be more cautious with the nobility F. From now on, her resolve hardens. She understands that this could happen again, and to prevent it, she must become strong enough to at least protect herself. In the distance, she notices a familiar figure. His return is met with relief. Gary joyfully calls out brother, and Alice exclaims. At the mention of Elle's name, he suddenly found himself face to face with Gry and Alice. Embarrassed, Edel stammered when Alice asked why Gry was here calling him. Incorrect name. He had not yet managed to respond properly when Griv bowed deeply before him, exclaiming his request. To be trained, he raised his eyes, his face full of pain, and said that he finally understood his own weakness was a sin. Edel, stunned, could only ask what had caused it. Suddenly, Gry explained that during the recent incident he was completely powerless and felt that if he could not handle even that, then he was no longer worthy to be called Brother Edel. Inspired by his words, Alice stepped forward, placing her hand on her chest, her voice filled with new determination. She resolutely said that she also wanted to become strong enough to protect herself. They are connected. Ernest Gaze's gaze fell on Edel, quietly waiting. He answered, meeting their determination with his own serious look. He agreed, but warned that his training was talked about as if it were harsh and questionable. Whether they would be able to keep up. Without hesitation for a moment, both answered loudly and Susie. Yes. Meanwhile, in the director's office, the class teacher was fervently apologizing for not being able to do anything as the student's class teacher. And the director listened and noted that it seemed he had underestimated this. The strength of that boy, the director pondered. Although this time it was impossible to avoid it, he was shocked that teacher Hyzen could betray them. He noticed that Ed L had single-handedly destroyed the ancient weapon, the dragon machine, but he could not believe that Hyzen had planned it all. All alone, he clenches his fist, showing his irritation to the assistant. He explains that he sent messengers several times, but everywhere they were met with feigned ignorance. His assistant, worried, begins to explain the situation. She does not back down and asks about the condition of the third prince. The director thinks to himself, despite Hyzen's clear testimony, the prince managed to avoid consequences, having all physical evidence destroyed. In a moment, the person they were talking about appears suddenly. The third prince senior enters the office, and Shaltier says that although she anticipated his next move, she is stunned by his very audacity. The prince calmly sits down in front of the director. When the prince settles down, the director's thoughts are restless. He knows that this man will not give up easily and strongly suspects that Hyzen was not the only agent of the prince's faction acting. Within the school walls, he sighs heavily, visibly tired. Honestly, says the director, I wish you would respect your elders a bit more. Prince Senior, unmoved, leans forward with a confident half-smile and counters that the director will probably make his next move, but what exactly it will be remains unknown.